It is 6:01. We are ready to start the live stream now. I will now call to order the study session meeting of June 29th, 2020. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being held electronically, and members of the council are participating remotely, pursuant to the council's electronic participation policy. Public access to the meeting is available on the local government access channel 8 for Comcast subscribers and on the city's YouTube channel online and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, welcome. Will you please call the roll?
Mayor Leidy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Here.
Councilmember Witkovich.
Here.
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Downing.
Here.
Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Duran Malika.
Here.
Councilmember Escobar.
Here.
Here. Can you not hear me?
There was a little bit of a delay, but we have you now. So Becky, you also,
Can you hear me now?
you seem to be frozen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Maybe sign out and jump back in. Okay, so thank you for joining us for our study session. We have 2 agenda items. The first one is light pole banners recognizing Black Lives Matter. So City Manager Geyer, will you take it from here?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Leidy. We're bringing this item back to City Council based on some concerns and Council's overall direction to bring this item back for discussion. Concerns were raised by several council members following the June 1st discussion about 2 proposed banners. Those are included on your page 2 of your memorandum. The first is a Black Lives Matter banner, and then a second banner which shares the message of "We stand against racism." Since this initial meeting and after the concerns were raised by several council members about the Black Lives Matter banner specifically, and it being possibly tied to a political organization, staff provided additional input, information to help provide more background and understanding on Black Lives Matter as a phrase and what it represents. Additionally, for tonight's discussion, staff has drafted a statement that if council does decide this evening to move forward with BLM banners, that you could issue this statement along with your decision to move forward with this first banner. Based on the direction that council provided to staff, we are moving forward with the second banner. So the direction that I need this evening is if council wants to move forward with the Black Lives Matter banner that's included in your packet and the proposed statement that we've drafted for you, or if there is different direction you want to provide to me tonight, that's the purpose of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comment? Councilmember Brown?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have I'm just going to give you my feedback. I have gotten many emails from residents that are against and some that are for the Black Lives Matter banner. Most people who call me against them state that it's like we are taking a stance and we're taking a political stance. And as elected officials, we should not be doing that. So my thought I'm really leaning more towards the other banner because I've had complaints about it. Not everybody is singular thinking. So my preference is to go with the one that says we are against racism for all races and we are not supporting one over another. That's my thought on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question and then I do have a statement. The question I got received from one of my residents that I've been emailing back and forth on was, is it, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure, is it legal for us to put up a Black Lives Matter banner? So I guess that's for Ruthie.
She's gonna
You're muted.
She's looking for it.
No, my little face moved, and so I couldn't find my microphone. Sorry about that. So I guess Councilmember Goff, your question is if it's legal for the town to actually put up these banners. Is that right?
Well, specifically the one that says Black Lives Matter. I guess the concern was that there's an assumption that it's a political organization, and can the city legally, I don't know, endorse a political organization? I'm not exactly sure the wording, but.
Well, I think it sort of depends on how you view it. And again, it's going to have to be a decision that you guys make as a council. But, you know, Black Lives Matter, there is an organization with that name, and then there's just Black Lives Matter as a statement itself. So, you know, it's one of those things where I think it can go one of two ways. So as supporting the statement itself, I don't think that's necessarily you all supporting a political group. So I don't think it's illegal, but there's obviously, you know, the what Councilmember Ward said, people could perceive it that way. So I can double check with Corey and make sure he's not leaning a different way. But so yeah, sorry, I'm not really giving you a direct answer, but because there are two ways to sort of view the statement Black Lives Matter, you know, I wouldn't go so far to say that it's illegal for the council to actually do that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, when Corey was sitting with us or virtually anyway, when we discussed it the first time, and he hadn't expressed any concerns. So I just wanted to clarify because I did get that question, and you know, the sooner we get an answer back, I guess the better. My comment about the Black Lives Matter is that you know, it's three words that a lot of people use and have used for different reasons. And the one, you know, supposed official organization was funded by three young women who are Black, and their goal was to try to bring awareness to injustices or inequities that Black Americans suffer in our country to a disproportionate number than, you know, other groups, whatever group you want to pick, I guess. And so I personally do, and even as a city council member, I don't have a problem with putting Black Lives Matter on there because I believe that as a city, we can decide what that means for us, and we can, you know, show people what we mean by it by what we do. I understand that there are concerns that other people have with it, and a lot of those seem to come out of kind of either a fear or a disagreement with the agenda or assumptions about what people who support a movement like this means. And all I can think of is that when you look back and other times in our history when we have had movements, civil movements against injustice in our government, all the way back to, I'm going to say, because I did look this up, 1773 to 1775, the Sons of Liberty, which were founded by Samuel Adams. You know, this is the group that was protesting injustices of the British government against people in the American colonies. And they did things that a lot of the other colonists at that time disagreed with or were afraid of. There were other groups that did damage to property or rioting that use that name. And ultimately, we have in our history books the idea that boarding these ships in the Boston Harbor and throwing other people's property and destroying it by throwing it into the harbor, as they did at the Boston Tea Party, is something that's considered now as heroic. And so I just, however we decide to go with this, I would like people to really think about how that story is told with those people being heroes and protesters that are not even involved in any kind of violent activity, but they all get lumped together as something else. People seem to want to be shying away from supporting a movement that is focusing on Black lives because they are the ones that are suffering the most right now. And that's just my piece. I'm just going to say that much.
So really quickly, Catherine, so I just want to gain clarity on this because it seems like what we need to do is actually come to consensus tonight. So are you saying that you want both banners?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's my opinion at this point.
Okay. Councilmember Brown?
Can I ask Catherine? Catherine, I want to ask a question because I went through their whole webpage and everything. Did you see in one of the sections how they call out defunding the police department? And, that is a major focus in their side. So I just want to throw this out. I'm totally going to listen to everybody else, but if we back Black Lives Matter, right? Are we then saying that we don't support our police department or we're looking to defund our police department? Whatever sign that we use, and I want to make this perfectly clear, whatever sign we choose to, we do it as a council, and I'm certainly, I'm open for it. I just need you all to know that there are other residents out there that have opinions and want to be heard, obviously, from my emails. So that's all I'm saying. And Catherine, I don't know if you saw it, but I did. I went through the whole webpage after Meredith sent it to us. And I believe if you look all the way to the end, it shows their proposal to defund the police station or the police department. And that was one of my residents' concerns.
Well, I understand that. And I do hear that from residents. That is one of the petitions they are supporting to do a national, I guess, movement or law, whatever, to defund police nationwide. Now, that's just something that they're supporting. And again, I think the three words just because we put those up, that doesn't mean that we are endorsing a particular organization that uses that label. And the other thing that I'd also like to point out is that we can decide, we're putting it up, this up in our city because Black lives do matter. And the only reason we're even having to say that is because they are treated as if they do not. I mean, that is just statistically the case that many more people of color are killed by police or actually, in wherever. They're more in jails. There's a lot of statistics we could pull up to talk about the disparities between. So my point is, I don't want to get into a big debate about it. And if everyone else doesn't agree, I'm fine. I'm not going to, that's fine. I just want to put out there that I personally do not think that there's an issue with putting those three words on a banner and defining it for ourselves for what it means in Northglenn. And I am not in any way at this point suggesting that we are defunding our police department. We have a good police department. They work really hard with community outreach, and I think we can continue to do that. And we all need work. It's not just the police. It's just not our police department, or I'm not picking on anybody.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I wanted your perspective on that, so I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Councilmember Malika and then Peterson.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor. So I actually have a quick question for Heather. So Heather, for the statement, the draft statement that you put in the memo, is that statement going to be the same whether or not we go with the Black Lives Matter banner or not? Because it kind of sounds like that statement would be appropriate if we go with the Black Lives Matter. So what would the statement look like if we didn't?
Well, that's a great question. The intent of drafting this statement was to help provide education and clarity on behalf of council as to your intent for putting up the banners, but specifically the Black Lives Matter banner, because of the association made to the organization and it being political and the anti-police, defund the police sentiment. So when Rupa and I spoke with Roberto Montoya, our GARE representative, BLM is a phrase that many organizations are using across the country in response to the events that are happening as a way to show solidarity. So when we elevated this concern that was expressed by several council members, Roberto's advice to us and guidance was that you can separate your association from the organization itself. And in doing so, he agreed that issuing a statement by council would help do that. Now, that's not going to address all the questions that you all may receive on this front, but it's a first. It's an initial start, and it's a way to really make it clear to residents that as city representatives, you're not associating with the organization itself, the political organization BLM, but that you have a desire to advance racial equity, and this is what your stance on that front is.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. I do actually appreciate the statement that you guys drafted. That was one of my concerns about when we discussed this last time, is what is the messaging campaign going to be around this, and how are we going to communicate? What do we mean by putting up these banners to our community? And I think that you guys did a really good job at really taking like a holistic picture of that. And so I appreciate all of you guys who worked on drafting that. So I definitely like the statement. Thank you for that explanation behind it. As for the banners, to be honest with you, I actually like Catherine's idea of maybe doing a mixture of both. I think that it could be a great way just to, have a statement about the moment we're in. Now, I want to be really clear that this is not really, it's not going to be a substitute for the actual work that we're going to be doing. And that's, the next discussion item. But I think that that's what's really important, is that we're making a statement about how we want to proceed moving forward and the work that we're committing to. And so I'm okay with, how this group wants to go. It's definitely, I know that there's some who have strong opinions versus others, so I'm really interested in listening to what everyone else has to say. But I like Catherine's idea about kind of going with both. I think it's a good mixture. So, thanks.
Councilmember Peterson.
Hi. I just went off the screen. Am I there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was just sharing the screen.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. Guys, a banner that needs an explanatory statement is a banner that we shouldn't have. If we're putting out a banner that we need to issue, not a communication strategy, but we need to issue an explanatory statement that we mean this, but not really this, that's something we shouldn't be doing. Here's my thing is there's no one political group or interest group that has a monopoly on racial righteousness and justice. And so I think the banner phrase, we stand against racism, as you see here, think about this. I think that is far more inclusive. And by the way, that's directly in line with strategic plan, which we all said that we were supporting and moving forward. I think that's our statement moving forward. We're moving forward with our strategic plan 6.1, and 6.1 says that we will maintain and celebrate our diversity. And when you look at those phrases that we stand against racism, that banner, which I really like, I think I like that banner more than the Black Lives Matter, and I'd like that one exclusively. That banner is fully in line with our strategic plan 6.1, and it's just more welcoming, and it's more, quite frankly, it's more inclusive. It's more diverse. I just have a hard time spending taxpayers' money on any group whose primary policy objective is to defund the police. And so when we talk about our budget and the things coming up, and we talk about that, that's a communication. That's not, this or this discussion. That's a this and this with everybody discussion. But even having hearing that we need an explanatory statement on this makes me, I think we're making a great statement. I've heard from residents that have said, we really like the idea of the banner because it says that we're in this together and you hear us and you acknowledge us. I think the BLM matter is a political issue. And again, like I said, there's not one interest group that has a monopoly on justice. And so I favor the We Stand Against Racism banner unequivocally.
Thank you. Councilmember Witkovich.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to kind of echo what Councilmember Peterson said about the explanatory statement. I had made a note about that. Not everybody's going to see that statement, especially people who are just driving through Northglenn. So I had a worry about that, that we wouldn't necessarily be able to explain our message to everybody. And unfortunately, the perception is that it's a political issue. I agree with BLM. I've taken a look at it after it was suggested that we look at the website, see what it's all about. I agree with just about everything except for defunding and reallocating funds for our Northglenn Police Department. I agree with it, but I don't think that it's something that all of our residents agree with based on the feedback that I've received. The feedback that I've received suggests that it's divisive. I don't see it that way, but that's something that the residents are coming back with. Let's see, what else did I have written down here? I just think the perception is that we would be supporting a political group, even if that's not what's happening. And so I just worry about that. I definitely support the second banner for sure, but I do struggle with the first one. I'm not so sure if I could support it.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to weigh in?
Meredith?
Yes.
Let's see.
Councilmember Downing, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have to say that initially I agreed with both banners and actually said, yeah, we should put more throughout the city. And then as we discussed it, and I was very comfortable leaving the meeting that night, at the end of the meeting, and thanks to Julie, she made a comment about, are you sure you really understand what you're doing? And then that made me start thinking about things, Julie. And so I actually went on the website and did some research on my own, and as well as receiving all kinds of emails, pro and con, the banners. But I really can't get behind the BLM because of the mission statement that organization has. I can't get behind defunding the police department, especially Northglenn. There's just so many different values that they are stating on their website that I totally don't agree with. So I would say I'm going to have to backtrack on what I initially said. But I do really like the second banner, where we stand against racism. I think that's fine to continue with that. And I know some of the emails I've actually received just recently, they don't even like, some of the constituents don't even care for those, but I would still support, I believe, that particular banner, but not the BLM banner.
Thank you. Councilmember Escobar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do support Black Lives Matter. You've heard me say it many times that all lives matter. I have to go along with what looks like the majority right now, and I hope it is, that we shouldn't have to explain what we mean when we put up any communication. Communication should be clear enough so that all residents can understand what it is we're communicating. We're taking a stand against racism. I support that. I don't want to have to explain the banners, so I would go with just the second banner. We hear you, we see you, we're here with you, we stand against racism. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am fine going with the second banner. I think banners, again, as we've all discussed previously are simply statements unless there's action behind them. So I'm fine with the second one, knowing that we've got more discussion this evening coming about how we can truly put some actions behind those words.
So, Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. You know, what Councilmember Wilford just brought up is, and actually Esquivel as well, this idea that the banners are, they're symbolic in a way. They are important, but they are not, certainly not sufficient to solve or address the problems that we're dealing with. And I don't want people to be, it's so easy in our society right now to quickly jump into an us versus them thinking. And I don't want people to do that and just really think that that's, you know, make assumptions about what Black Lives Matter means and what the city council means when we put that banner up. So I would be fine with not using that banner, but in just putting up the We Stand Against Racism banner. If that's going to be the first initial step, and we really are committing ourselves and dedicating our efforts to doing some meaningful change beyond just putting up a banner. So I'll just say that at this point.
Thank you. So it sounds like, Heather, we have consensus to do the one banner, We Stand Against Racism. A couple of points I wanted to echo. I think this very small gesture is a metaphor for the larger group. I've been reflecting over the last couple of weeks where, you know, we rushed and we were like, oh, this is a great idea. This is a great idea. Let's go. And we rushed. And then someone asked a really good question. And that made us step back and think. And in that space, so many residents filled the air. They came forward, they reached out to each of us, some of us as a group, some of us individually. I started to go back through my email today to see some of my emails had all of you on it. Some of them just came to me. But I had more than 10 emails about this issue. And this was one of those things that we hadn't asked our residents about first, right? So this whole kind of cycle of we made a quick decision because we were passionate about the message and the direction we were headed. We asked a really good question, that why question, and are we sure? And then we got more resident input. So along the lines of Councilmember Downing, I shifted my thinking because I was 100% wanting more banners, more of both all over the place. And in really listening to the residents, I was like, ooh, it's not clear the point Randall made about having to explain a banner. That's tricky. So, I mean, I think we came to a really good place, but for me, it was a metaphor of slow down, get more resident input before we take action. So, thank you for that. And, Councilmember Esquivel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the question for Heather. Have we decided how many of these banners we're going to put up? In the last discussion, we were talking about adding more than 16. Have we made any kind of decision as to how many?
So the original proposal was to do 15 of each banner for a total of 30 banners. And those banners would be put up in addition to the banners that would stay up would be the ones that are COVID-19 related, the city stay at home, ones in partnership with Adams County. And then we have the second banner, our COVID-19 banners standing apart together. So what I would recommend based on tonight's discussion is we do 30 banners of the second banner and we place them as originally planned throughout the city.
Thank you.
Okay. Heather, do you have what you need on this topic?
I do. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move to the second item. I will pull up the presentation. Police and Community Partnership Task Force. Let me get so this was an item that Mayor Pro Tem Wolford and Councilmember Mullica brought forward. Here we go. Okay, can everyone see it?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay, so I will help navigate. Julie or Jenny, does either one of you want to begin?
I'll actually kick it off. And so I think first of all, I just wanted to say thanks everyone for being here on this special study session to address these final two items on the agenda. I think it's really important that we continue to have this conversation as a community, similar to conversations where our nation is having. Northglenn's discussing how to address inequities in our community, specifically when it comes to public safety. And so I feel like this is just a great next step for all of us as a council to finally sit down and virtually sit down together and have this discussion. And so I'd really like to just thank everybody for being here tonight, all of council. Thank you for your leadership. And then thank you, of course, to our residents. I know that they're from, the feedback that I'm sure every single one of us has gotten, there is a lot of perspectives to consider when we have this discussion. And I know a lot of folks are tuning in tonight. So thank you so much for all those residents who are passionate about this issue and want to make sure you have your voice heard. So I'm going to kick it off. Jenny, do you want to go over this slide?
Yeah, of course. So just so you all kind of have a sense of where we're going, I'm going to cover some of the outcomes that we're hoping to accomplish this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the elephants that are in our virtual room this evening. We'll talk about make some acknowledgements, and then we'll turn it over back to Mayor Leidy to ground ourselves in the work and talk through some of the steps that as a council we've taken thus far. So thanks for driving, Mayor Leidy. So first with outcomes, following the first march that Northglenn had, I guess a couple of weeks ago, probably about 4 weeks ago, residents started reaching out and they wanted to talk more about a civilian oversight committee. They had a lot of different ideas. They had many, many different questions. And some of the overarching themes that residents felt strongly about was that they wanted to have more of a balanced conversation with our police department about transparency and accountability. And, since the Northglenn Police Department prides itself on doing a good job and being really well liked, they really thought that bringing this added layer of community oversight wouldn't cause any concern. If anything, it could provide a public-facing dedication to community partnerships. Let's see. So the commitment that Councilmember Mullica and I made in these conversations with residents that we spoke with was that we would bring forward their ideas to council for consideration, which is exactly what we're doing this evening. Once we've shared some of the resident input, we wanted to collect feedback and have a discussion with council and really give council the opportunity to brainstorm and to think big about how we might want to move forward together. And we're hoping that by the end of this conversation this evening, we'll have a clearer sense of where our destination is, how we're going to get there. Mayor, if you'll move into the next slide, please. Thank you. So I think it's really important that as we get started with this conversation tonight, that we just address the number of elephants in our room. And if there are ones that we're missing, let's talk about those. But the first one, I think, I've heard from council members is, why are two council members initiating this conversation? So we're initiating the conversation because residents reached out to have this conversation with us directly. And this is what we do as council members, right? We talk to our community, we work to figure out solutions that we can bring to the table and how to move forward. We did follow council protocol in requesting the item to be added to an agenda. So we emailed the city manager, requested the item to be added, and then an email was sent out to council, making everyone aware at the same time that we wanted to have this conversation. And again, I can't say this enough. It really is the role of council members to listen to residents and bring ideas forward for consideration. And that's exactly what we want to do here tonight. Other elephant in the room. Does having this conversation mean that we don't support our police department? The answer, full stop, is no. I think everybody on our council supports our police department, myself included. Just like City Council, our police department deeply values community partnerships. And this conversation really presents the opportunity to further explore that conversation and figure out how we move forward together. Other really big elephant in the room that I know I've gotten a couple of emails about in the last couple of days. Are we trying to defund the police tonight and in future conversations? The answer is no. I mean, I obviously can't speak for the rest of the council, but I can speak for myself. No, nothing about this conversation tonight is about defunding the police, dismantling the police department, firing staff. That's not on the table. But we do hope that this conversation evolves into a point that we can talk more about what public safety means to our community in Northglenn and really think hard about what's missing and are there gaps that we can better fill for our officers or for our community. And, you know, make sure that we move forward in a way that's collaborative and build a solution that's right for Northglenn. Mayor, if you'll move up to the next slide, please. So the other big elephant in the room is what's the rush? I think three things are really important here. I think it's important that we be responsive to resident concerns. I think that the, issues that we've been talking about as a council are complex and layered, and we really just want to start a conversation. And I think I've said this a couple of times now, but the best path forward is one where we build a partnership between the community and the police department. The one last thing I want to say about, the urgency, and I've heard a number of folks say, well, change just takes time. So according to GARE, which is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, the organization that Northglenn's chosen to work with, there's often a belief that change is hard and takes time. They've seen it repeatedly that when change is a priority and urgency is felt, change is embraced and can take place quickly. Building in institutional accountability mechanisms via a clear plan of action will allow accountability. Collectively, we must create greater urgency and public will to achieve racial equity. So I'm going to leave it there and kick it back over to Councilmember Mullica to go through the next couple of slides.
Okay, next slide. Thank you. So what I think is really important is that we just, as we start to have this discussion, it's really important that we are very clear about where we are right now. And just so that everyone, our residents and all of councils is kind of on the same page, right? So acknowledgements. So no decisions have been made yet. We have made no decision as a council so far on how we are going to proceed on this particular item. And so I just really want to make that very clear for everyone. No decisions have been made. This is the beginning of this journey together and the discussion that the council is going to have. So we did have concerned residents that shared their ideas. So one group is represented in this presentation. Others have called and emailed. So as I said before, many of us have been receiving lots of phone calls, lots of emails about feedback. This is one perspective that a group of residents have brought forward. Now, I think it's really important that it's a great way to start the conversation and to figure out how we're going to move forward as a council from this point. We want to bring our entire community along in this conversation. And I think that really goes back to the feedback that we've already gotten. We've had lots of community members reach out. I think there's so many more perspectives and so many more stories that we need to collect from our community. So, which is why we need to keep seeking feedback and listening. So I really hope that whichever way we decide to move tonight, that our community is really the center focus. We have so much that we need to hear from our community. Next slide. Okay, other acknowledgements. So it's an obvious one. We don't have the results from the PD assessment, right? Nobody knows what's in that document. Nobody knows what the recommendations are going to be. We're not scheduled to receive those until for another couple of weeks. And then we have, the consultant coming in on July 22nd to have that discussion with us. So nobody's seen these results. We don't actually know what's in them or how it's going to lay the foundation for the work we're going to do. I think that just to stress again the process that this is going to be a long discussion. I think that this group is going to have with our community and with our council members for a long time. And so I think it's really important that we just give each other the grace and the understanding that our ideas are probably going to evolve throughout this process. So we're going to hopefully get a lot more community input. We have training already planned. We need to hear about what's in the assessment. There's so much information that's missing that we need to be really thoughtful about in how to decide to move forward. And most importantly, we want to do this work right? We want to make sure that whatever plan we decide to move forward with is the right thing for Northglenn, and that, we give ourselves time to grow and collect the information we need. So it's okay that this is going to take time because we want to do it right. And then, of course, we need a plan. I think that we've heard a variety of opinions on this subject, and we really just need to figure out, as a council, how are we going to move forward for our community? And so that's why I'm really excited about this conversation today, because we need a plan of attack. We need to start this conversation to figure out where everyone is at so that we can move forward. So next slide. And actually, Mayor Leidy, feel free to work us through where we've been.
Okay. So some of this is intentionally redundant. We didn't want to completely cut and paste slides from previous presentations, but we wanted to re-ground ourselves for this conversation, especially because it was meant to follow some important pieces last week. So first of all, the strategic plan, we started this thinking months ago, a year ago. We have a ton of action steps that are teed up and ready to go. So this is exciting. This means it's not a complete shift from the work that we had lined up anyway. So that's exciting. The diversity, inclusivity, and social equity framework. So this was something I had a resident ask me where they could find it. So that was presented last week on June 22nd. And you can see that framework if you want to go back to those meeting documents. And at that time, council provided consensus to move forward. The My Brother's Keeper pledge is also really important to this work. It's right in the mix. We've had multiple study sessions already on this topic, and we've had resident input on police oversight. So last week, we had some public comment. We've received a ton of information. They're sharing some of their input in tonight's presentation. But I know all of us are getting feedback daily, phone calls and emails. And so we just want to keep that going. So really quickly, the strategic plan, this is the goal that we're talking about, maintaining and celebrating our diverse community. So it's in our plan. The key action steps that are already up and running are partnership with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, development of a race and equity task force, the microaggression training, and the race and equity work plan. So those are key action steps that are up and running. And we did make note that the COVID-19 pandemic did press pause on some of our city work. So while we may not have been doing this in recent months, it's been in the plan since November, I think is when we approved it. So these are the three phases in the diversity, inclusivity, and social equity framework. Starting the conversation, we've already done that. We are in the delving deeper phase. So that's right where we are, which is great. Something to make note on the My Brother's Keeper pledge, when I announced that I had signed it in partnership with Chief May and our city manager, Heather Geyer, the commitment to sign this pledge, I had said at the time, and I agree, is that the accountability to the timeline is so strong. And that was one of the things that drew me to this. There are a lot of pledges and organizations that are saying, hey, do this, sign this, commit to this. This one I liked the most because it was clear and it was aligned with our city, but it also gave us that really tight timeline. So you can see the 4 phases here. Reviewing our police use of force policies. That has been begun with our PD 360 assessment by the consulting firm Barry Dunn. Engaging our community. These are 3 examples. They are not the only examples. We're going to continue this. We're going to add to this. We're going to engage our residents even more than this. But these are 3 very specific ones. So the final report of the assessment will be available to the public on July 10th. We will have a full presentation to City Council on July 22nd. And for other council members that haven't looked at the July calendar, I needed to make note that we have a meeting on the 20th. The 22nd is an additional meeting. So if you haven't added the 22nd as a Wednesday to your calendar, please do that really quick. And then in response to those 2, we will have another telephone town hall for residents to call in with specific questions about this item. So number 3, reporting the findings of the review to the community and seeking feedback. This is the one that I believe is so critical because we're gathering feedback right now ahead of seeing the results of this assessment. So we'd like to look at the results of the assessment, let the community look at the results of the assessment, give the community time for some Q&A on the 29th, and then seek more feedback in possibly a listening tour or other formats. And so that's a section. Number 3 is the one that I'm most curious about, how we can get super creative. I've had a lot of interesting conversations with residents this week, and I've been asking, how best can we do this? Which community leaders can we tap into so that we're connecting with residents that really need to have a voice in this conversation? And then step 4 is obviously reform. That's that action step. And so this goes, if I back it up a little bit, it matches the 3 phases in our framework. So there's some really great alignment here, which is exciting. So we have had previous study sessions on this topic. We began talking about our ideas on June 8th, again on June 15th. We had more conversation on June 22nd, agreeing to bring ideas forward at an upcoming meeting. So we want to make sure that we're having space to do that, but we didn't specify a specific timeline. So I believe that that's the piece that's missing, that as an action step, I recommend that we tackle as soon as possible. All right.
All right. And Mayor, I'll jump into the resident proposal. So this is ideas that residents brought forward. And so their thoughts are represented on the following slides. I think it's really important that we clarify that these are not my ideas and these are not Jenny's ideas. We really wanted to make sure that these are the ideas of the residents who are really invested in having this conversation. I think the fundamental belief that we're working on here is that residents should have more of a voice in what public safety looks like in our community. So I think that that's at the bottom line, that is where we need to keep coming back to is, how do we give our residents that voice and how do we continue under that mentality? Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the proposal for the Citizen Oversight Board. And so what their proposal would be establishing a new board similar to other boards that we have, independent from the police department. And these are the possible responsibilities that they listed out. And so I think it's really important that they want to exist independently from the police department. They want to reach out to community members for input and participation. They want to review data on citizen complaints and their adjudication. They want to review body cam footage, assess and review officer conduct conduct history registry, assess and review data from the internal database from Senate Bill 15185, discipline officers or recommend discipline that department leaders will enforce, and propose policies to further accountability. Next slide.
I'm going to pick up from here in the next two slides. So this slide pertains to membership of this committee. This committee should include Northglenn residents of diverse backgrounds, including but not necessarily limited to members of CPAN, youth, young people 18 and under, individuals that identify as LGBTQIA, members from the disability community, underrepresented individuals and minorities. For example, this could include persons identifying as Black, Latinx, Asian, Native American, or Middle Eastern, other at-large members to be determined, and the group size could be anywhere between 6 to 12 members, depending upon the level of interest from the community. And Mayor, if you'll move up to slide 15 here, we'll keep on going.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question, Jenny? Sure. I'm noticing on slide, this one, independently from the police department without current ties to law enforcement, and then members of CPAN, are they not, that's okay? They're not recommending, those seem like two different things to me, so I just wanted to see.
Are they excluding members of CPAN?
No, they're including them. I just didn't know. I mean, that seems to be a tie. That seems to be a tie to law enforcement. So I just wasn't sure about that one.
Perhaps that's something that we can explore, but I understand CPAN to be the members of folks who've previously completed the Citizens Police Academy. So I think it's worth asking the residents that put together this proposal, but I think they were very, they recognize that members of CPAN bring a lot to the conversation, and that there is a valued place for them at the table.
Okay.
I think the clarification was perhaps there wasn't, I think that they didn't want anybody with a law enforcement job right now. But I think that's something that we as a council can explore, what pieces, all, etc., that we may want to explore within this proposal. So I'm going to move on here to slide 15. So if possible, it would be helpful to consider adding folks who have one or many of these backgrounds. So a background in mental health, in social work, working as an addiction specialist, somebody who has worked within the domestic violence community, expertise in marketing and communication, experience supporting individuals experiencing homelessness. Additionally, an individual who is either currently or formerly a race and equity training professional. So these are some of the core tenets of the proposal that residents spoke to Monday evening, last Monday evening. And Mayor Leidy, I'm going to kick it back over to you to slide 16 as we start thinking about some of the questions that as a council we may want to consider.
Okay. So I'm going to go through a couple of these slides. And then let me get through them all, and then we'll have a discussion time because there's some things to think about. So I can see some of you are taking notes, and I appreciate that. So continue to do that, and we'll talk in just a second. So a couple of questions that were raised is, what is the question here? So should we develop a community-based task force on public safety that collects more information and provides recommendations to council about possibly an oversight committee such as the one we just saw? Or should council lead the community outreach and information gathering to move us forward? And is there a hybrid approach? So a couple of things, and these aren't the only paths, these are just two options. So if we look at the first one, if the community task force, that would be, some questions we would ask would be, well, who should be a part of this group? What is the group tasked with producing? And what's the timeline for that work? And then the second one is, if it's city council, possibly what we would want to do is develop a timeline of next steps, generate some questions for the residents, ideas for a community-based group on public safety, and then generate some of those ideas for how do we gather resident feedback and input. So the question really is, where do we go from here, right? Are we going to go this way, that way, or maybe it's a completely different way? The question that keeps circling back in conversations, either among council or with city staff or among residents, I've had a lot of really great conversations, and we get stumped right here. We get stumped right here every time. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And if we can tackle that, it might help us figure out which way to go. But that's been kind of the most fun question to ask residents, because it definitely takes us down a really interesting path. So here's some of the things that we want to think about is, regardless, we know, we've talked about this already, that we need to gather input from as many residents and as diverse a group as possible. That's something that we had started talking about a couple study sessions ago with either a listening tour or I liked the community dinner idea, if we can space everybody out. Or what are some ways, I had a conversation with one of our religious leaders in the community about, is that something where, he could help facilitate a conversation so that we can reach more residents? Like, what are all those ideas? We need to really stretch ourselves there. And we have this conversation frequently when we just recently did a resident survey, and we talked about what are all the million different ways we can reach out to residents, because we like to get as much participation as possible. But we also want to go, what questions are we asking? Because to have a simple survey that says, do you like this or this? Do you want a community oversight board? Did you like this presentation? Is it yes or no questions? Is it a scale of questions? Is it deeper than that? That would be something that we would need to figure out. And then what are some ideas and input we have? Full transparency, where we're getting stuck in some of our conversations is we don't know what to call it. Are we calling it this one says community-based group on public safety? Is that the group that then develops maybe an oversight board? Are we talking about an oversight task force, oversight committee, oversight board? There's so many different words. And so as we talk to one another about it, that might be something that we need to tackle. But thinking through what's coming next and what we need to do is, if we were to develop a timeline, here's some dates to think through. The assessment's coming out on the 10th. The assessment presentation is on the 22nd. We have additional meetings scheduled because they're not scheduled yet. We need to schedule them for the council trainings on implicit bias and microaggression. So these are additional meetings coming soon, and we'll talk to Heather about that in a minute. We've talked about having a GARE facilitator for these, but we might want to have a GARE facilitator for these work sessions as well. So as we think about making a decision, we're not making a decision tonight, but what things do we need to figure out tonight? We could make maybe little small decisions that will push us forward. So do we want to continue this conversation during council meetings? I think we've seen that we still have city business to do. And so we're at risk of pushing ourselves very late and then not finishing a conversation appropriately, which we don't want to do. The work is too important. Maybe we should schedule additional work sessions, and then that would help us carve out appropriate time to make sure that we're tackling this the best way possible. In your presentation and packet, you also had 2 slides of additional resources. There's a ton of stuff here. So, you can take time and look at that. I had asked Heather to ask Rupa to take notes for us tonight because I'd really like us to have a really robust conversation. I want to hear from everybody. And we want to figure out what do we need to do? There's a ton here. So if we look at this, I think this is kind of where we're landing. Where do we go from here? And so I'd like to hear from every council member if possible, so that we can, and Antonio's on it. I love it. So everyone, if you can all find your little blue hand, it's very helpful. So Council Member Escobar, you are up first. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm looking at the slide. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? Now, I've had emails, I've had phone calls, I've had text messaging, I've even seen, which I must confess, I don't have a Facebook page. I don't believe in Facebook, but I sometimes am a voyeur of Facebook. And I've seen on Northglenn Care some stuff that is, it turns my head. So what is the problem? I've heard anything from police brutality, and I've often asked the question, what's the evidence of that? And no one can give me a specific incident other than the incident we had 3 years ago of police brutality. We have complaints of racial profiling. So I asked for examples of racial profiling, and they tell me about a time that they were stopped 10 years ago, 4 years ago, but nothing recent. When I ask them if they filed a complaint, no one's filed a complaint. So how are we to know these things if we're going to solve a problem? Now, I personally believe, and I know, that racism is alive and well in this country. But I want to know what I can do about Northglenn. I can't solve the problems in Commerce City, can't solve the problems in Denver, and I surely can't solve the problems in Washington. But I believe that I can contribute and solve problems here in Northglenn. So what I would like to know is, what is the problem? And then once we know what the problem is, I think we as a council can come up with solutions to solve this problem. And I'll leave it there, let everybody else weigh in.
Thank you. Councilmember Goff?
Okay, I'll take the plunge. I think the problem, in very simple terms, is it is a question of, in a way, of public safety, because I think it is that.
I can't find my hand.
Okay, Becky, I see that you'll be next. You're still a little digital. You're still a little digital. If you want to call in for ease of technology, you certainly can. I'm going to let Catherine go back to sharing.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh gosh, I probably lost my train of thought now. The people that I have talked to, a lot of people, same as I think all of you have, from a lot of different viewpoints from across the whole board. But the reason I think we're talking about this now comes from certain citizens being afraid for their safety in anywhere they go, and that includes Northglenn. So I talked to a woman who had family members with terrible experiences with an Adams County police officer. So, I mean, I haven't heard anything specific to Northglenn, but the thing is that if you have a consistent history or, set of experiences that are not just, like nerve-wracking, but actually harmful, physically harmful in dealing with police, you're going to have that fear of all police. And so whatever we decide to do, or, how we want to tackle this, I think that needs to be addressed. And our police department and Chief May have done great jobs of community outreach. So I would see whatever we're going to be doing is kind of an extension of that. So that is a big part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that there are just, sort of systems in place that make it more difficult for people of color or minority groups or whatever, other kinds of people who don't fit the mold of what, we're used to dealing with or we expect people to do. And those people don't have the resources or the means or the trust even to communicate to us what they would like to have happen in Northglenn, to be comfortable and safe in Northglenn. And we have people who, on the other end, who are perfectly happy with Northglenn and don't want to see any changes to it. And I'm afraid to say that I don't think that's possible because the world is changing. So we are going to have to address some of these issues. So it's tricky because we want to be able to balance the concerns of all of our residents. But I do think that the fear of what's going to happen when a policeman pulls you over affects some people more than others. And that tension, that fear, that nervousness, that can lead to further complications and problems. And I know we're going to have some training on that as council members. And I know our police department has taken some training on that, and will continue to do so. But we also need to do something that reaches out to those residents who have those kinds of fears to build the trust that they can feel just as comfortable and safe living in our community as anyone does.
Thank you. Anyone else ready to jump in? Councilmember Witkovich.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to chime in briefly. I know we'll have more chances to talk as we go through this conversation, but I just wanted to agree with Councilmember Escobar. We do have some idea of what the problem is, and we've heard stories and all of that, but I do think we need to delve deeper into that question so that we can have a better. I'm hearing myself echo. There we go. Okay. So I just think we do need to explore that question with residents so that we can, we need to know that first before we can determine the solutions. And I think that we had talked about a potential facilitator for those conversations. And I really think those conversations and the outreach is really important before we start, taking action.
You, Councilmember Peterson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilman Escobar, and I think that's a strong statement and a poignant question to lead our discussion. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And we have, big concept problems and individual problems, but it all seems so amorphous, absent detail. One of the things I would like to do is I really would like to look at the 360 survey. I would like to explore it. I would like to learn about it. I would like to see what our police are doing right, what they're doing poorly on, and what they maybe have room for improvement on. Because the whole thing with the 360 assessment and any professional worth of salt will always be engaged in self and professional betterment, right? And I think that's one of the things that I want to look at the 360 survey and see, like, okay, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and then when we take a look at a weakness, we can then take a look at a remedy and start talking about various remedies for that specific weakness. So I think this is an interesting concept, and I'm interested in learning more about it. As of right now, because we don't have any of the information, either with 360 or a larger community outreach specifically focused, not on a vague concept, but a specific policy proposal, I'm still asking the question, and I think that question will be better answered after I read the 360 survey.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to clarify, we're still on the point of council discussion around what's the problem we want to solve. Awesome. Okay, I'm seeing some head nods, so that's a good reminder here. So I guess one thing I want to address, and then I'll move into some of the things that I see that we should be thinking about. I hear the sentiment that we have to wait until the 360 review has been done. And I guess I appreciate that, and I respectfully disagree. I think that convening a community oversight group has nothing to do with the 360 review. I think it can happen with or without a review. And in fact, digging into the 360 review is something a community oversight group could take on and ensure that, we're getting even more meaningful information out of it, identifying gaps, identifying questions that we as a community may want to dig into more deeply. And so I don't look at it as we have to do the PD or we have to see the assessment before we can take any action. I think what's on the table tonight is figuring out, do we want to move forward with a community oversight group? If the answer is yes, then how do we want to do that? Do we want council to design that and look at all of the body of work out there in terms of examples of how to do things right or how to not do things? Because this concept's not new. Communities across America have community oversight groups. And so I think that we've got a lot of information we can work with. So again, the question is, do we want to move forward? And if we do, does council do the work of designing what this task force or community group looks like? Or do we pull in a group of residents to collectively design that with us? So in my mind, that's what we're talking about here. I've had a lot, as I hear that you all have as well, I've had a lot of residents reaching out, some in Ward 4, some not in Ward 4. I'm happy to receive feedback from members of our community, despite whether or not they're in my ward, because I know that my vote, while I represent Ward 4, has impacts for everybody across our community. And I have heard stories that, frankly, they're disgusting. I've also heard really great stories about how fantastic our department is. And I think, I think it's important to recognize that our department sure has some strengths. We also have some weaknesses to work on. But one of the problems I see is, outside of just this conversation, I don't really see a venue where we're actively doing that year round. Whenever there's a problem within our city, or when we're on a ward meeting or on a telephone town hall, whenever there's an issue that a resident raises, the answer is call the police. And I don't think that fully recognizes or fully acknowledges that there are issues and problems that our community members face where it's just not really appropriate to call the police. Somebody's bicycle being left on a yard and it's not theirs, and you call the police, that's not really their job. I think also there are instances where our officers are called out to deal with mental health crises, and our officers are not mental health providers. They're just not. It doesn't, unless they've gone to school to be a mental health provider and are actively practicing, they can be trained, but they're not mental health providers. And that's not a fault of our police department. It's just recognizing that we could be talking about community safety in a very different way. And so I think I've tried to share a number of the things that I want to solve, but a couple others that I've heard from residents are that police oversight is entirely internal. I think to council members Goff's comments that residents are concerned for their safety, I've certainly heard that one. Heather and I've had conversations around, some of these concerns that I've heard. And, one of the questions I keep hearing is, well, if, there really was a problem, why didn't this person just file a complaint? And what I think is important for all of us to understand is that if you have had a really negative experience with the police department, if you've been raised to believe that the police aren't your friends, why would you call their boss and file a formal report? How would you even know who to call? I wouldn't know that you would call Heather. I would think you'd call Chief May, and that doesn't exactly feel comfortable either, even if he is a lovely human. And so I think that there are a lot of problems here that we have to solve. And, you know, I don't think that we should ever be thinking about, you know, solving this problem as a us against them, as either we're with the police department and we can't have any oversight and we can't ask tough questions, or, you know, and if we are asking tough questions, we're anti-police, because that's not the point. The point here is to figure out how we move forward and how our community grows, and the way that we change, how the way in which we do policing grows with the community.
Thank you. I think I need to back up, because I don't know that we are asking the same question. So you started by saying that the question is, are we for or against a community or a citizen oversight board? I don't believe that's the question. I don't think we have to wait for the police assessment. I'm looking forward to it. I think that may help us with the what problem are we trying to solve question. We've made a lot of assumptions about what's in it or not in it, but we haven't seen it. So it's very interesting to wait, and I'm not to wait for it, but I'm looking forward to it, if that makes sense. What I want to wait for is to get more resident input. As I mentioned, we're getting a lot of phone calls and I'm having a lot of conversations, and it's not all in alignment with a citizen oversight board. So as far as tonight, if it was a question of, do we have consensus to say yes or no to a citizen oversight board, I don't have enough information to have that be the question on the table. I definitely have too many residents pushing back on that idea. I have too many unanswered questions before I can move forward 100%. The idea of what it looks like, there are so many different types of citizen oversight boards. I had a resident call me this afternoon and in support of it, but when I started asking, what does that look like? Tell me how that works. Who's a part of it? What is their task? What is their role? And he went off on a completely different path that had nothing to do with the proposal tonight. So we have to get clear on the definition of that before we can even say, yes, I really want it, or no, I really don't support it. And that I didn't think that was the purpose of tonight's conversation. And I saw quite a few hands really quickly. Randall, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here, but my hand should be taken down. I spoke for now.
Oh, you're not ready to speak right now.
No, it was left up from when I spoke earlier.
Oh, sorry.
It wasn't taken down. All right.
Well, I do have Councilmember Brown and Councilmember Downing on deck.
Thank you.
Councilmember Malika will be third.
Okay. The one thing that I got a lot of emails and phone calls on, in all honesty, and it kind of amazes me because it irritated me at first. I'm going to be really honest. It's an elephant in the room to call this a task force with only people who are of the same opinion. It should not be called a task force, because you can't just take one side of it. I know that some council members have called out to other wards and tried to get, the momentum behind it, which I think I disagree with, to tell you the truth. If you want to talk to your ward members, feel free. But the other wards, I'm the one, maybe another counselor in another area is aware that it's happening, and we have residents that are complaining about it. So if somebody's doing that, I'm just going to say, make sure you're choosing the right residents, because some of them do not believe in the message, and then they get upset and they get offended. And that was the call that I had today. That's my elephant in the room. My other statement is, I see both sides of the story. I see waiting until the 360 assessment is here, because I think that the 360 assessment will guide us into changes. It'll show us shortfalls and things like that. I'm not making a decision tonight. I disagree with several of the bullet points that were provided by the task force that I would need to go really through. There are things that may have legality issues. There are things that I don't think a task force should be involved in that is not police, within our police departments, don't get me wrong, but there is, for instance, there's a bullet point on the slide that says that they would like to review the body cam. They don't get to do that because we don't get to do that. The district attorney does that kind of thing. So I think there's some miscommunication in what we can do at a city council level and what we can do at a county level and what we can do as at a state level. And I think that when we have conversations with our residents, I try to be really clear where that responsibility sets. If it doesn't set with the council or it is illegal, I'll call it out. You know, I'm not against a citizens advisory board. It needs to be cleaned up in my mind and things need to be removed from it. But I am not against it. And I hope that our residents are hearing that. It's been a very unpleasant 2 weeks for me. And I don't know why. The name calling, my middle name is Paderewski. You know, my parents, I come from Poland. My lineage is from Poland. My mother and father, my grandmother barely missed the Holocaust because she got away. So there are things that we need to be mindful of when we're saying things, you know. I think those are my two things. The residents that I heard from were upset that it is a task, it's being called a task force, and there is no input except for one side. That was a big complaint from my residents and the residents that contacted me I had a couple from Ward 4 and I had a couple from Ward 3 that contacted me directly. So it was a prevailing message. And I'm not just talking about the CPAN membership. And I think that you all shouldn't rule them out and dismiss them because they belong to CPAN. I think you're making a mistake. Everybody has an opportunity to go through the police academy, learn how the job's done, go on a ride along, do things like that. If you don't know how your police department works, stand up and say, I'd like to go on a ride along. When can I do that? You know, experience the police department more than just verbally. I am not in a position at this time because I do require more resident input. I am not at a point in my day or life to agree to a citizens advisory board right now. We need to go over the issues that are on the slide and really discuss them through. There are a couple that I just feel are way out of line. I'll be really honest with you. I do not appreciate the way that the CPAN members are referenced and spoken about as if they don't matter in the community because they have a direct link with the police department. And some of them are feeling that way. So those are my thoughts on it. I addressed the elephant in the room that my residents did not like it being a task force with only one side, and that their other council members did not know that this task force was even being discussed. So that's my elephant in the room. And then, as I said, I think that we have some groundwork and we have some ideas of where to go, but there are things within the slide for the Citizens Advisory Board, if we're going to call it that, or the Safety Board, or whatever it's going to be. I think that I'm not ready for that because of the things that I disagree with. The other thing that I would like to bring up with is CAB. We have a Citizens Affairs Board. They meet every month. Catherine was on it for a while. Nobody comes forward to CAB, and CAB is our platform. So I really want to think about when we start talking about a board or commission or what is this just not residents? We have a commission that is called CAB, and that is for resident complaints. It can be the police department. And Catherine, help me with this. It can be because you're having disagreement with your neighbor, they'll try to help you. There are other things that they work on, and I don't think that we've explored what CAB does for the city because a lot of people don't know about it. I don't even think all our council people are really aware of everything they do, everything they are capable to do. They are a group that came to council maybe 2 years ago and asked for additional responsibilities, want to help the city out more because the residents weren't going to the CAB meetings. I think that, in my personal opinion, that's where I think we've already got a start with them. And I agree that we should try to find medical professionals. We may have to do like we do at NERA and step outside of Thornton, or I'm sorry, outside of Northglenn. But that's steps, you know. But that's my thoughts on it. I want to make this perfectly clear to anybody that is listening. I am all for an advisory or a safety program. I feel that there are things in that in the bullet points that are not appropriate for an advisory board, and but I'm not against it in any way, shape, or form. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Downing.
Thank you. Councilwoman Brown pretty much said what I was going to say. I was going to suggest the CAB or CAB, which is your Citizens Affairs Board or Advisory Board. We have had this board, it's in the charter. These individuals cannot sit on any other board other than the CAB because of the potential conflict of interest. They are there to listen to citizens' complaints and work with them. A few years ago, the city council actually looked at the fact that they wanted to possibly absolve them just because there was not enough work for them. And the citizens, and it was put on the ballot, and actually it was put on twice, and one in 2009 and the other it was 2017. Each time the citizens came forward and said, no, keep it, we want to use it, and so we're not going to take it out of the charter, we're not going to remove it. I think it's a perfect starting point. I don't know what that looks like. There's 5 people on the board. I think as far as appointed go, we only have 4 right now. But I think it's a starting point, and we can utilize these people. And we can always expand the board. People can go to the meetings. They can share their concerns, and there could be something that comes out of that whole thing. So anyway, I would definitely support the idea of looking at the CAB and utilizing them. I mean, these are residents of Northglenn. These are people that the council has appointed, and we should look at what they want to do and let them help. I mean, this is a very how can I say, this is a time in history that we're moving forward. There's going to be a lot of changes, and I think that these people can help us and help the staff and help guide council. When I say all this, you know, I really appreciate people having interest in the city council, interest in what's going on, and interest with Mr. Floyd in his untimely death. I think it is horrible. I think it's horrible to have these things. But I don't think for Northglenn that it's just one problem that we're trying to solve. So when we say, what is the problem? I don't know what the problem is. I agree with Antonio. I think we need to figure it out. It's going to be many more work sessions. I don't think we can solve it tonight. And it probably isn't going to be for a while. I want to hear what the 360 survey tells us, because it's going to be another starting point for us. And then we have already started with the strategic plan. Why would we start from ground zero and then start all over again? I think all the things we've been doing and all the things we're going to do, we are moving forward. But I think going too fast sometimes is to our detriment. And so just like with the banners, if I hadn't researched the banners and I hadn't listened to Julie, I probably would have not changed my decision. So I think we really have to be very thoughtful about what we do. I'm hearing from a lot of people on both sides, and I just want to hear more. I think we need more input from everyone in Northglenn, not just from a few. So that's my spiel. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councilmember Goff, I see your hand, but I'm going to tell you who we have in order. So I just wanted to let you know so you didn't have to keep doing that. So I have Councilmember Malika, then Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Esquivel, and then Councilmember Goff.
Okay, thank you so much. So I really appreciate everyone bringing their perspectives forward. I think one of the things that I'm hearing about that I actually agree with on a lot of council members' feedback is we need more information. We're not entirely sure how to take the next steps. I don't think we're where we want to be to decide if there's going to be an oversight board or anything like that. But it sounds like we all need more information. And I agree that the obvious first step would be to look at the 360 assessment that we have. So I'm just like everybody else, very eager to see what is in that report because it has just been, pressuring us. But one of the things that I do want to bring forward, especially when it comes to reviewing the 364 report, so let's just start there. If that's our official next step, that's already in line, we're going to do that. One of the things that I want to bring to this council for consideration is if you look around the people who are on the screen, there's 9 of us, right? That's 9 individual perspectives of Northglenn that we have. We have 2 people of color, me and Antonio. And we have just diversity in age and gender. We have 2 guys. Thanks, guys, for being here. And so one of the things that I really think that it's important to do is realize that there are only 9 perspectives that will be reviewing that assessment. That's us. I don't think that's enough, guys. I don't think we're bringing in, and maybe I'm making some assumptions here, but are we bringing in a voice, an LGBTQ voice? Are we bringing in a voice from somebody from our disability community? Are we bringing in voices from various religious backgrounds? And now these are all assumptions, right? I'm not trying to paint labels on anybody, but I think one of the things that I really want to do is I want to do this work right. I really want to find what the right solution is for one. I mean, we have residents that are begging to have a voice. Why can't we put together whatever it is we want to call it, task force, committee, group, whatever it is, why can't we bring a group of diverse voices to the table where we could all, they could share their perspectives. So instead of just having 9 perspectives, we have some other number of perspectives, right? Depending on how big we make this group. So even if it's simply just to convene this group for the 360 assessment, and then trying to complement or trying to figure out what our next steps are going to be, why not have more diversity at the table when it comes to just reviewing the 360 assessment? Because our eyes could only see what we could see. We are our lived experiences. And to be honest, I just want to see more diversity at the table because I can't tell you what other people's experiences are. I can only speak to my own. And so another thing, I'm not actually against perhaps looking at the cab as an option. The only thing is there's not all the members are filled. I want to make sure that there's diverse voices on that. And to be honest, when we've previously appointed people to that board, I'm not really sure. I don't know all the members who are currently on there, right? And so how do we make sure that we have diversity in that board? We're really making sure we're getting diverse voices. So, I mean, that could be a consideration. I'm not against that at all. But I think what I really want to see is, are we bringing a diverse perspective to this conversation that's beyond the 9 of us? Because I feel like our perspective is
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just tried out the whole raising my hand feature. It only took me, how many months have we been doing this virtually to figure it out? So I guess I just want to take a moment and clarify a couple of comments that I've heard. First, I've heard that the residents that put together a proposal was a task force. They weren't a task force. They were a group of residents that had ideas and wanted to share them. And they reached out to council members to try and figure out the best venue to do that. So not a task force. I don't think anybody has ever said that CPAN volunteers or their experiences aren't valued, because they are. They're absolutely valuable. And I think that they're a part of whatever equation we do come up with. I think if the Citizens Affairs Advisory Board is not working, I don't know that sending another thing to them to work on is going to make them work. If you think back to my comments about, if I wanted to file a formal complaint against a police officer, would I know to call Heather? Would I know to call Chief? And if I don't know to call either Chief or Heather, how am I going to know to reach out to the Citizens Affairs Advisory Board? I think the other kind of issue I have with, and this is a whole nother, never mind, I'm not even going to go down that path. But I think that what Councilmember Mullick outlined, just in terms of there's a real lack of diversity on that board, is something that we should consider as well. I've heard that there are, that many folks want to continue to receive resident feedback, and I think that's valid. And I certainly appreciate your resident feedback. I think that makes a ton of sense. Sorry, I keep getting a weird echo. Is somebody not on mute? Is anybody else hearing that as well?
Everyone.
Oh, you're hearing it too, Joyce?
Yeah, I am.
Do you want to try going on mute and see maybe?
It's not me, but I will.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. So I appreciate that we all want to hear resident feedback. I think that's super important to the way that we all do our job. And it's something that I certainly appreciate as well. But I just want to give you a little bit of perspective here. There are many situations that we've had residents come forward and speak up about an issue that they've been really passionate about, or about an issue that they're having or that they want to explore. And I feel like we've always been really responsive to that. I can think back on a couple of examples. We had a handful of residents, a very small number of residents, come forward and give us feedback on our short-term rental licensing program. And we heard that feedback and made some changes. We've had residents come forward about being frustrated that live near Northglenn High School and share that they felt like students were blocking their driveways and leaving trash everywhere. We took action. We heard from residents when they were upset about Melody Drive and Livingston and Claude Court, and we took action there. We had residents tell us that they were frustrated with fireworks. And I feel like we regularly hear from residents, but oftentimes we'll make decisions without hearing from residents. And I think we are hearing from residents. I've heard from more residents on this issue than I've heard from my entire tenure on council. And I'm just wondering, I guess the question I want to pose back to the rest of council, is additional community feedback is great. Like, let's not get that twisted. Community feedback is fantastic. But when will we know that we have a sufficient amount of feedback? And what feedback in particular are we looking for? How will we know when we get there that we've got enough feedback? Because I appreciate that folks are engaging community members when they're calling and asking, well, what does this mean to you? Well, what does that look like? I think those are all really good questions, but I also think it's important to understand and recognize that our community members aren't local government experts. They don't know our local government in the way that we do. And so they're not going to have all of the right things to say. They're not going to know every single lever to pull in order to get what result? That's why they have elected city council. And so I think that we should take the feedback as, as much as we can get, or as much as council wants to consider, and build out something that works for everyone. So I'll just end there and lift up my question again around how are we going to know when we've got enough community feedback?
So really quickly, Mayor Pro Tem, I wanted to clarify again. I feel like you were referring to the comment I made about the resident. Is that what you were referring to? The resident that called and had an idea, but had a different idea than was presented tonight?
I think it's not just directed at you, Madam Mayor. I think it's just a general sort of thing for us all to think about, just in terms of residents may bring ideas forward and may not know exactly how to say it the right way, or may not know what, I guess, constraints that we or our police department may be working with, but it doesn't make their feedback or their ideas any less valuable.
I totally agree with you. I thought you were referring to the comment I made, because there was no expectation that that resident was pulling the right levers. I didn't know what you meant by that. I think it just, when we ask, they're not meant to have all the answers, but when they say, I demand an oversight group, and I ask a clarifying question, what would you like that to look like? And then I get something different than resident A, that's where it just makes me want to dig deeper. That's all I was saying. So I added Councilmember Downing to my list. Councilmember Escabel is next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have so many notes here, I don't even know where to start. But it's true about issues. We as representatives of our ward and of the city get a number of issues that come before us, as Mayor Pro Tem Wilford just pointed out. Let me take you back 3.5 years when we had the Northglenn, the Melody Drive study. And we're just not even complete yet, but we have got some paving done, and we got a few lines drawn in the highway. That's 3.5 years, give or take a month or two. So the wheels of government work extremely slow. And I think it's important that the citizens know that. There's not going to be any quick fix to anything, because it takes time, takes research, and we need to make good decisions when we're making decisions for the entire city. I personally support the idea of expanding the Citizens Affair Board and renaming it. Anything else you want to slash into that? And the current members who are on that board, if they are uncomfortable with the diversity that we're seeking, then they can always step aside and make room for others. I'm sure that if they signed up to be just a Citizens Affair Board and they don't want to get involved in oversight, then they have the option to forego that appointment. So I do support that. And I'm not saying that I don't support an oversight board, but I'd like to remind everybody, careful what you ask for. And by that, I mean, Denver Police has had a Citizens Oversight Board for years, decades probably. And look at all the problems that they have, and nothing's really changed. So I'm not sure that having a oversight board will change a whole lot. I think it's up to us as leaders, as was presented in the council meeting last week from our city manager, our inclusive and diversity, I'll look up the right wording, but we all know what we're talking about. Just that plan alone gets us to many places that we're going. And a couple other notes that I have here. Mental health. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford mentioned that maybe police don't need to respond to mental health issues. And I agree with that to some extent. But a mental health patient with a gun is a serious, serious problem. And today, gun ownership is at its highest level. So how do we make that decision whether to send a social worker out there or to send a police officer out there? Who makes that decision, and how much information can you possibly get on a 911 call? Domestic violence, one of the biggest calls that probably comes in this country, goes south really quick when a police officer shows up. Do you send a social worker with two people are having an argument? I think you better send a police officer with that social worker. So there's a lot to be discussed, and there's lots of opinions. And mine is just one. Oh, by the way, I had a text message from a listener or a viewer who's under the impression that public input is going to happen tonight. That's not on the agenda. Is that correct? Okay. I think
that's correct. This is a
I don't think that was communicated to them, because somebody wrote me a long email that I can't even read. The font is so small. I'll read it later. But it had to do with being disrespected, and he wanted, the caller wanted to be recognized. So I don't know how that got in this place. And we heard from Council Member Goff, and these are not attacks to my council members. I don't mean to do that. And if you feel attacked, I apologize ahead of time. But fear of police. How do we combat fear of police? You know, if you want a friend, if you want a good neighbor, be one. If you want a policeman for a friend, seek him out. Systems that are in place, they keep people from making complaints. What are those systems, and how can we as a council augment and fix those systems? That doesn't require an oversight board. Those are things that we can do internally quite easily. And I think the criteria that was set up for, or not necessarily the criteria, but the recommendations for membership. I didn't see any clergy. I didn't see any, I mentioned last time, we have a church right there on Pecos on 108th or 109th. It's totally Spanish-speaking church. And I'm sure Immaculate Heart of Mary probably has Mass in Spanish. And there are other, thinking of the mosque and other diverse groups that should be on this list. And I know this is just a generalization, and we're not making decisions about this list, but those are key. And I too have a lot of problems with the possible responsibilities. You know, I think that alone is a 2-session study session. We can't even cover it in one study session, not in 4 hours. Unless we do an all-day retreat or something, because there are lots of things there that are not possible, illegal, and an infringement on other people's rights. Viewing a body camera of my family member is not your right. And I can sue you for that, regardless of what the incident was. That right belongs to a law enforcement agency. So there's a lot to be discussed there. I probably have worn you out with my ranting and raving, but I appreciate your time. Thank you. And council members, no offense, it's not about one council member or the other.
Thank you. Council Member Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do want to say that I don't feel offended. I appreciate hearing other people's perspectives. And I'd say the same for the residents who have contacted me. And to Councilor Brown's comment about people from other wards calling her, you know, I've gotten emails and phone calls from people and they don't always identify what ward they're from. So I don't know what that comment was in reference to. I think it's true that we were elected by the people in our ward, but the decisions we make affect the whole city. So it's not that we're limited to, you know, just talking to people that only live in our ward. So I just wanted to point that out. And the other thing was that I did not hear anyone tonight mentioning anything about CPAN in any kind of a disrespectful way. And I thought from the slides that they were included as like a constituency or stakeholder in whatever kind of group we were going to put together, that they were one of the people or groups that we wanted to invite. More is better. I think we need a full spectrum of voices and opinions. And I being on the CAB, which stands for Citizens Affairs Board. It's not an advisory board, believe it or not. It's a Citizens Affairs Board. I don't know that we can do anything to change or modify that without taking it to vote, because I think it's in the charter. So right now, I don't know that we could do much to that without, I don't know, a lot of time and I don't know, whatever else, logistics. And besides that, I have to say the reason I was on the Citizens Affairs Board, one reason is that I had seen that on the ballot, had no idea previously to what was a couple of years ago, what that was or what it, did or didn't do until I saw it on my ballot. And I thought, well, I don't think we should get rid of something that's sounds like it's going to speak, the citizens get a chance to speak to the city council. I think we should keep it. So I voted to keep it. And I really do believe that's what a lot of people did, even though they don't really know what it is or what it does. It sounds like something that's a good thing to have. And in actual fact, it wasn't very effective. The whole time I was on there, it didn't do much. We struggled really hard to keep a full membership on that board, and they still don't have it. I don't think they've gotten a replacement for me when I left, and people don't know about it or don't know what it does. I mean, the history of it maybe was more effective or active in the past, but if I came up for election again, I would probably not vote to keep it. So that's just that. And then the other thing I was just going to say is that in terms of fear of police and how we deal with that, it's easy to say for someone like myself to if I see a police officer in the park, and I have done this before I was involved in city council, to say hi and talk to them and all that kind of thing and make a friend that way. But it's not so easy for someone who has actually seen violence towards someone that they know and someone that looks like them from a police officer. And so it's just not that easy to do. I mean, that's kind of like the problems we're talking about, having somebody call in a complaint for, what they thought a police person was acting inappropriately, or anyone, any official, is if they don't, they feel like they're left out of that whole process. That's the systemic part of this. It's not about individual persons. We could have great people in those positions, but if the process for communicating or contacting a person or making a complaint or reaching out puts obstacles in the way of someone who doesn't have the education, the experience, the know-how. I mean, I can tell you the last time I was stopped by a police officer was probably 15 years ago, and I hadn't been stopped, I don't know how long before that. I didn't really know what I was supposed to do. I couldn't remember what I was supposed to do. It was raining. I pulled over to the side of the road, and I sat in my car for what seemed like a really long time, and I thought, well, the police officer isn't coming out to talk to me. Am I supposed to get out of my car? I just didn't know. And I think things like that can happen and be a huge obstacle for people who don't know what they're supposed to do in a situation. And I do agree with Councillor Wilford that may be why we don't hear from some people, or we don't get the complaints. And just for myself, thinking for myself or a person in our community, if they wanted to know, let's say, I heard a citizen sent me some statistics about the percentages of white and Latino or Latinx or Black people in our community, Asian, whoever they are. This percentages were all laid out. But if I wanted to know what percentage of traffic stops were by race, or ethnic group, how would I find that out? How would I know? How could I see if that is in fact, sort of matches the makeup of our citizens, or is it, disproportionately one group over the other? We know that nationwide, certain groups are being targeted. There's racial profiling that goes on all the time. So there are a lot of just questions that I think our citizens want to know, and I think they should have the right to know. however we decide to get that information out. If it doesn't have to be a task force, or it doesn't have to be whatever we want to call it. But I was looking at our pathway options. We have an option A and an option B. Whichever one it is, I think we need to get a lot of input from our citizens, and we need to bend over backwards to try to find ways to encourage people who don't trust this, government or the police, or people who just, think everything's fine and they don't want to be involved in anything because it seems like extra work. We need all those voices. We need to hear from as many people as we can to try to figure out exactly what they think the problem is and then what to do about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Really quickly, I was going to see if City Manager Geyer wanted to weigh in on CAB really quickly. I pulled up the charter. That was a question I've had. And so I was wondering if Ms. Goff could speak to our charter in that way, or if we want to just reach out to Corey at another time. I think it's used if it's known to be used. So I know City Manager Geyer encourages residents to use it, and they have. I've been copied on emails that have gone to the Citizen Affairs Board. I just kind of read the email and let them do their thing. But looking at the charter, and there's a question for me because it says each district shall be represented on the board by at least one board member residing in the district. At least one. I don't know if that gives us flexibility, or if there's other places in the charter. If it does give us flexibility, I think it's a possibility. So it'd be interesting to look at. Heather, did you want to say anything about that?
Well, what I was going to suggest is Joanna Smaller, City Clerk, is the liaison to that board.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Joanna might have some perspective to share with council.
Joanna, my apologies. I did not know that.
No worries. So if you want, I can back up just a teeny bit. The charter actually has an entire article that addresses the Citizens Affairs Board. And so it speaks about the intent of the board, their function, the procedure, how the board handles those complaints and proposals that they receive. So regarding the intent, and the Citizens Affairs Board has been in the city charter since the charter was created. So the intent is to provide a body within the city government to which citizens of the city and other interested persons may freely present complaints and proposals. It talks about that the intent is also that such body be composed of people who are not otherwise involved in the day-to-day operations of city government. Their function is to be an advocate on behalf of the citizens of Northglenn. The board shall receive and consider complaints and proposals from the citizens of the city concerning the city and its government. And then the procedure, this is where I think we get into some of that ineffectiveness that Councilmember Goff spoke about. We have found that when residents have a complaint, and even the proposals, that it's much quicker, much more timely to just go to City Hall directly instead of to present it to the board who meets monthly. Because the way that works logistically is if a resident presents a proposal or a complaint to the CAB, they do that at the monthly meeting. There's not an opportunity for the board to take action on the complaint or proposal. They really just receive that from the resident. And from there, the procedure says that they direct all inquiries and requests to the city manager, who then refers the inquiries or requests to the proper city employee. So that's what happens after the first meeting, where the proposal or the complaint is received. Once that information is gathered, they might take the information back to the next monthly meeting. And so the board works on months at a time, which isn't very timely when residents or citizens want an answer to their complaint right now. And so they usually receive that better when they just contact City Hall directly. In saying that, I know that the members of the current CAB are definitely willing to reach out. They have talked on a few occasions about promoting themselves to residents, about attending city events to introduce themselves to residents, to make sure that people know who they are, what they are, and that it's definitely a resource that's available to residents. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has affected some of that because those events that they wanted to attend haven't happened. But I know that we continue to advertise for the board in the connection. We do still have the 2 vacancies, and those are in wards 1 and 3. My concern is what Councilmember Goff alluded to, and that is that the membership of the CAB is set in the city charter. And so I think it might take some creative ways to expand that and to add that additional representation that it sounds like is desired and definitely needed. And we would want to make sure that we're doing that in a way that can provide equal representation to those additional members. I'm more than happy to talk to the board about how they feel about it as well. We have a meeting on Wednesday of this week, but that's a little history of how the board has functioned in the past.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you. Just to help us with the discussion, we've had a couple of people chime in with that. So I have Councilmember Witkovich and then Councilmember Downing.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I have a lot of thoughts written down, so I'm just going to get going here. I go back to what the mayor said, and I agree that we definitely need more resident input, specifically about the police and community task force. Is that something that, residents even want? I think that some folks are feeling left out of this conversation. I think some people didn't even know that the conversation was happening. So I think it's really important that we step back and make sure that they're included as well. And we're making sure that we're reaching out to them. And this is just specific to Northglenn, because we know that there's lots of issues going on in our country that do need some serious overhaul. And maybe that is the case in Northglenn, but we need to focus specifically on Northglenn to see what our residents have to say. I agree with the mayor also that we don't necessarily have to wait for this 360 assessment to kind of get going. I think that's really going to inform our discussion a lot better, but I think there's things that we can start doing now, like hearing from the residents. I would agree with Councilmember Mullica about a task force to look at that 360 assessment. I'm on board with that, a diverse task force to look at that. I think that would be great. After it's presented to everybody, I think it would be great if we have a separate task force take a look at that and make recommendations to council. And maybe that leads to the community police task force. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know, but I like that idea. And so I think that's something that we should consider. But I also think it's important that we look at other citizens oversight boards, whatever we're calling it. I should have known, but I didn't know that Denver already had something in place, as Councilmember Esquivel alluded to. So I think it's important that we look at those other examples, see how they've worked in other places. Also, one of the resources that was provided in our presentation, the National Association for Citizen Oversight of Law Enforcement. They do these webinars, Citizen Oversight 101. And so I'm doing one tomorrow night. So that's just a starting point. I just looked through all of those resources and I'm like, well, there's lots of great information in here. And so I'm just going to start with that tomorrow. But there's lots of other things in there that I haven't had a chance to look at. So I'm going to start with that. I wanted to address the comments about responsiveness to residents. There are a lot of things that we are pretty responsive about, but there's other things that we aren't. There's residents who want crosswalks, but they don't get those crosswalks. There's procedures in place. We've got to go through those. Another example would be animal licensing. We've heard from a resident who wants animal licensing. Just because she asked for it, it didn't happen right away. So there's a process with all of this. I just wanted to make sure that was clear because we try to be responsive and there are some things that we're able to just knock out, but not everything. And if that's the perception, I just want to make sure that's put away. Another one would be the fireworks. We've got a plan in place for fireworks, but it's not sufficient for all residents. they're not happy with it. Some people might be, but there's a group of residents who think more needs to be done. So, the responsiveness, it's kind of subjective. The last thing that I kind of wanted to mention, let's see. Oh yeah, there was a question in our presentation. Do we need more work sessions? Yes, obviously. I think we do need more work sessions. I don't think we can just cover all of this on our Monday city council meetings where we have other city business we have to cover, and also our study sessions. I just don't think that's going to cover it. So I think we definitely need to do that. But most important, I think we need a timeline. And in my opinion, the most important thing, the first thing on our timeline is we need to talk about who do we need to bring into our conversation and how do we do it. To me, those seem like the most important things right now.
Thank you. I have Councilmember Downing next, and then Councilmember Esquivel, and then Councilmember Brown. Oh, sorry, Antonio. Nope, you had an old hand up. I didn't take it down. So Councilmember Downing, and then Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to thank Joanna for the clarification. And I am wondering, I know in the past we have given the CAB other tasks to do. So I believe that we can expand upon what their job responsibilities are. I would suggest that we check with Corey to just see just how far we can go with that, But I know in the past they've done citizen surveys, they've done all types of things. So I appreciate the clarification that Joanna had. I like what Ashley said about the process. I mean, we need to figure out what the next steps are and go forward with that. Otherwise, we'll be all over the board with it. As far as community outreach, we're going to have the telephone town hall. And plus, there's various other things that we're doing. Folks reach out to every one of us, as well as I feel very confident that our residents are pretty savvy about the website and Google and all the information that they need. I mean, many times they share with me, and then kind of put it out for me to decide what I want to do. So I'm thinking they're more savvy with their information. I mean, and just looking at the presentation that was given to us by two council people, for sure, they have a lot of information that they have shared with us. And so I am confident that that we're going to get more. And I'm willing to listen to it. I want to listen to it. I want to learn. And so I'm thinking that's, I just don't want to not credit people for not understanding how to get their information, because they do. They know how to get it. As far as the police department, how do you say that, when was, for mental health folks or for DV type situations where our police department has to go out. We have the Ralston House where we have the police department goes out and helps with the Ralston House do different things. These counselors are not going to go out there alone. They are not going to go out there into a dangerous situation, not knowing what's going to happen. So they need our police department. So I just want to share that. I just can't believe that. And in talking to some of the folks from some of the different organizations, I know one lady in particular said to me, I won't go out there alone without my support from the police department. So we have to be very careful what we want, and because sometimes you get it and then you really don't expect what you've gotten. So be very careful. I don't want to rush into anything, but I think everybody has valid opinions, and I really think that we can all work together to come to some kind of consensus. But I think right now we're just rehashing the same stories over and over again. And I would really like to see what the next step is so we can move forward.
Thank you. I wanted to add something just really quickly to what Ashley had said. So I know I said this a couple of weeks ago, but I'm not sure if everyone heard or remembered. But, I want residents and council and staff to know that we are looking at all of these things from a regional approach as well. So, we're getting a lot of questions about the body cameras and a lot of, push. And, we started that before, we started looking at vendors before it was kind of teed up already. And we're not waiting 3 years, but we're having conversations with other cities, other mayors, other council members, other chiefs of police to talk about, specifically, could we get a better deal if we all went with one vendor collectively? We're hearing from cities that have them, and they say, don't get this one because there's some flaws and they've updated their software, or, you're going to need to buy new internet server stuff, and there's a technical cost, and there's an FTE, and there's a lot of things. And so we're having these conversations behind the scenes. This work is happening, and I want residents to hear that. But we're also having conversations about these boards. So for Councilmember Escobar to raise the fact that Denver has one, Aurora has one, Broomfield has one, and I had mentioned that the mayors were coming together and having conversations about who has what form of the citizen group. How does it work for you? What do you like best? What is not working? What needs to be improved? What are some best practices with these? So we are having that regional conversation. And so I don't want anyone to get the impression that this idea is off the table. I think what I'm hearing is that we all are just asking for more information. We want information from our residents. Is this something they support? We need information from study sessions to figure out what is the best way to move forward, the most efficiently, the most effectively for our city. Our city is different. We are not Chicago. We are not Detroit. We're not Minneapolis, right? We're Northglenn, and we want to do something that's effective and important and impactful for our community. So I just wanted to add that small piece. I'm so sorry. So Councilmember Brown. Oh, we got to unmute you. Sorry, I think we had some feedback. Can you unmute, or do you want me to try?
On.
Oh, perfect. You're ready.
Oh,
got it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have, I just want to do some clarification really quickly. A resident reached out to me who felt intimidated by a city council member who had called her to, she felt, push an agenda. I shared that information. That is a resident of Northglenn who was contacted that she felt that there was an agenda being pushed. She felt intimidated, and she felt it was inappropriate and that it was disrespectful. That's why I shared that. The other thing about the police academy, that is, it was on the slide, just like you said, Catherine, and I appreciate you saying that. But this is your residents that have come back and said to me after our town hall and some of our other conversations that some of the CPAN people are feeling like they're pushed aside and you're lumping them with the police department, that they're no good. So I just wanted to bring that up to council's, council site. I wanted you guys to know that we are excluding some of our citizens, and they are feeling that way. Not every person in our community is going to reach out to every single one of us. We're all going to get different feedback from different people. I shared 2 experiences that I had. One was today. And that's why I brought them up. I am in favor of extending study sessions to twice a week. And the weeks that we have council meetings, I'm all for doing another study session. I think that we have to be mindful of our other commitments and make sure that we get it on a day when we're all available. But I am more than willing to put the work into this. I do, you heard me say that I felt that we need more citizens' input. I can't remember who it was that said, I think it was Mayor Pro Tem that said, when do we know that we have enough input? How did we know we had enough input for the rec center? How did we know we had enough input for the police department? We make ourselves available. We've all been through this. We've had organizations that have gone out with target questions at events. Granted, we're not having our events, but we do have some cool things, that we're doing. We have reached out for public input in other matters. So I think when it comes to that, we have a period that is open for public input. And it's a time frame versus a number, right? I can't remember how how long the public input took on, say, the rec center. I'm not saying that it has to be that long, but I know that when we planned the roads and the new calming policy, we took more time as a group to listen to our residents than we are right now. So that's my clarification. I was not meaning to upset or degrade any of our council people you take calls from anybody you want. You get somebody from Ward 2, please take it. But I think we have to be mindful that we have a complaint from a resident. Okay? I think we have to be mindful of that. And that's really all I have to say. I just wanted to clarify those 2 points because I felt like I didn't do a good job of explaining it at the beginning.
Thank you. So I have Ms. Goff, you raised your hand. Thank you.
Sure. So I believe it was Council Member Downing that asked the question about if the Citizens Affairs Board can, if you can sort of change their function. And just so you don't have to bother Corey with it, I did take a quick look at your code. And that section 2-12-3B says that as a town council, you can authorize that board to perform additional tasks as you deem appropriate. So I don't know if that helps your conversation at all around the CAB specifically, but if you guys as a council decide that you want it to perform a different function or an additional function, not necessarily a different function, but additional to what is outlined in both the code and the charter, then you guys can certainly choose to do that.
Thank you. I really appreciate you jumping in there with that. That's helpful.
Not a problem.
Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you very much. When we started the conversation, I'm going back to what Councilor Mullica said about the whole purpose of this is to increase and be ongoing with engagement and openness and communication with how can people voice their concerns, right? How can people be involved? And I think that's fantastic. And I want to continue down that road. I would like the police to be a part of this conversation. And I would like the police to be a part of this conversation in terms of how can we have citizen engagement, police transparency, understanding, and communication. I think jumping to saying, even calling it for discussion purposes, like an oversight committee. I don't know if we're looking at oversight. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's advisory. We've talked about who makes this stuff up. If our goal is to have transparency and communication between our police and our citizens, I want to, like everyone here, want to hear from more residents. I want to have maybe more of some clear-cut ideas about what we're looking for. And maybe that's not possible in the short term, but it's certainly laudable for a goal. But I really would like the police to be a part of this conversation, so we can learn how we can their experiences on how to communicate and open their communication even more with our residents.
That's good.
Thank you. Okay, so I have Councilmember Mullica and then Councilmember Esquivel.
Okay, thank you. So I actually think that we're slowly getting somewhere. I have a couple suggestions. One, so it does seem like we could tweak or have some flexibility with the CAB. I mean, one thing we can consider is, do we expand the membership of CAB as it sits? We could technically create a subgroup of CAB. I'm not really sure what that looked like, but it seems like we do have some flexibility to move in there. So I'm not against, exploring what that may look like, and if folks really want to go the CAB route. One of the things that I do actually want to agree on is with Randall, and that's, how do you have the police part of this conversation too? So I think when I go back and I'm looking at that kind of membership slide proposal, there's a diverse group of people around the table. There's folks we have CPAN folks who have been really invested in our police department for years, right? So those people have a unique set of skills that they're bringing, perspectives. And then, I also like the idea of having, and I don't know which police officer would be involved. I mean, we'll leave that up later, but I mean, what I'm imagining this group of diverse voices having a conversation with our police department and talking about next steps and reviewing the 360 assessment. I mean, what else? Like, that's like a perfect recipe for what I think needs to happen. That's the conversation that needs to happen in our community. And, to be, to kind of have them work in parallel of us, and we could work together with them to really figure out what next steps are. I really think that having diverse voices, PD, all together, conversation, I think we could really get some really useful information out of that. And maybe this group could also help us figure out other ways that we should reach out to different organizations or different groups throughout our city. So, thank you for sharing your opinions, everyone. I think we're actually getting somewhere. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. Councilmember Escobar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with both Councilmember Peterson and Malika. My question is for you, Ruthie. When you read what we could do with the charter, does that also include membership? Because it was restricted to 4 wards and an alternate. So could we have more members from one ward than the other, or does it all have to be in balance, or what would that look like?
So that's a good question. Actually, I sort of anticipated it from the discussion. What I just quoted from specifically was the code. So the charter and the code, they do act in unison, but when we amend the charter, it requires an election. You guys can amend the code via ordinance when you choose. So the actual membership of the CAB, that's composed in your charter. And so for that specifically, it says it shall have 5 members. So, and those are 5 qualified electors. And it says each district shall be represented on the board by at least 1 board member residing in such district. And, I'm not as familiar with the wards in the district, so I apologize. But if you have more than one, or if there are only 5 districts, then my reading is that you can only have 1 person on the board or on the CAB representing that district. So I think you can expand the membership, but it'll take a little bit more maybe finagling of the language to actually make it happen. The reason why I say that is, like I said, the charter is where the membership is, it discusses membership. So when we change things in a charter, that takes a little bit more than actually changing something in your code. Your code does specifically discuss the wards. And so that says that there's 1 member for wards 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then there's an at-large member. So to me, that's saying that you have each of your wards represented, and then 1 person can be from any one of those wards. So because it's also discussed in the code, we may be able to expand it, but that's something that, maybe have to talk with Corey about. But as I see it right now, because the charter is so specific, I think it would really depend on how you are thinking about either expanding or redefining the membership of the board.
Okay. Councilmember Brown. That was a weird noise.
Somebody brought out their buzzer.
I know. Becky, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Am I unmuted now?
Yep.
Cool. Perfect. This again is for Ruthie. When we look at like the NURA Commission and things like that, you're popular tonight. Corey's never popular.
He always does that to me.
Yeah. we have members of NURA, and then we have members at large, right? Can we find out, Heather, maybe that's more for you, since we're going to take it to Corey further. Can we find out if these can have members and members at large, where, you know, in the NURA board, we have advisors is what we have. And then we have our board. And I'm wondering if we could do something like that for CAB, if we were to expand it. And that would give us our diversity with our different people, with our religions, with our Latinos, with our Polish people. I want to see it on the table. Things like that. I think that if they could be advisors to the board, that could be beneficial for us. So would you mind checking into that?
Yeah, I'll
Heather?
take a look. And just so I'm clear on how I pose the question to Corey, and then Nora, I'm assuming that's your Urban Renewal Authority.
Right.
Okay, so you have advisors to that specific authority, and you're wondering if we can apply that same principle to CAB.
Yes.
Okay.
Because they
I'll take a look. Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look just because I'm not as familiar with how that relationship works with the advisor and NURA. I just don't want to give you a misinformation tonight, but we'll take a look for you.
Okay, I appreciate it. I think it might, it might help us get to the point where we can have 20 people as advisors and still the facilitators are your CAB members, but that's my only comment on that.
Unmute myself. I believe I have Councilmember Mullica and Mayor Pro Tem next. Is that correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go. So one of the things that I don't want us to get really bogged down on with the CAB, because it may or may not work for us. And I know we really want to do something with the CAB and we really want to do something that's beneficial with them. But unfortunately, it doesn't really sound like we may be able to. I don't know. So I guess one of the things that I'd like to just get an idea from this group is CAB aside. Whether or not we could do CAB, I don't know. Would people be open to some type of like police and citizen like group? I don't know what we want to call them either. Task force group or whatever coming together. And then what would that look like?
Mayor Pro Tem?
I just want to ask kind of a process question. I certainly have thoughts to add in here, but want to honor that Councilmember Mullica just asked a question that could help us kind of choose our own adventure. So I'm wondering if before I provide my comments, if we could get feedback on her question.
For sure. I'm still, I think, I feel like we've, rewound a little bit to Mayor Pro Tem's original question, probably an hour ago. I would like, my personal opinion is I would like us to set a timeline for future meetings where we set some action steps. And if we had an interest in doing work session stuff today, it would be around how do we gain more resident input. And I heard that from quite a few council members tonight too, is that there is a desire to hear from more residents. How many is enough? I did appreciate Councilmember Brown's description of a timeline, a window of time. But I think we have to do a better job of connecting our residents. I think this goes a little deeper than how do you feel about snow removal on a scale of 1 to 5, right? I think this goes a little deeper. So I would propose that we schedule a study session that maybe is outside of our typical calendar, a work session about this topic, and we come up with the most diverse ways to reach our residents and to reach the residents that don't typically feel comfortable or safe giving us input and feedback, and ask them. Because I was explaining to a resident recently that to me, it's not a tie. It's not like, well, I have 3 people that want this and 3 people that don't, so they cancel themselves out. I don't believe that's how it works. However, when we're looking at feedback, when we have balanced feedback, it's like, well, we have people saying we don't need it. We have people demanding that we have it. So how to figure out how to move forward on behalf of the residents is tricky. And so I feel like we need to hone in and at least take the time to have more conversations with residents. So I feel like that's the natural next step. Not necessarily saying, yes, we have a board or not. Because if we don't know that that's really true, then it's just based on the information we have today. Does that make sense? So I'm just wanting more input from residents. And I think that takes a study session to figure out how are we doing it and what questions are we asking. So I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to that piece. Julie, do you want to restate your question after I just said a bunch of stuff?
Sure. How did I say that? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is I hear that everybody wants more resident feedback. And I agree that we need to come up with a plan to move forward with that. My question was really around, do we, regardless of what happens with CAB or not CAB, do we want to work on trying to recruit and bring diverse voices to a table where we also have conversations with PD, and we could have this group come together and talk about the 360 assessment? I mean, that's, I think, the bottom line of at least next steps we know we want to do. We want to look at the 360 assessment. We want to look at trying to get community feedback. Is there value in bringing diverse voices to the table with our police department and coming together to have a broader conversation on this?
Councilmember Witkovich and then Peterson next.
Thank you. I think I answered this question earlier, but I just wanted to reiterate it. I agree with the idea of creating a diverse task force to take a look at the 360 assessment after it's been presented on July 22nd. And then I would like to get recommendations from that board. And then council will discuss those recommendations. It could lead to a further community task force, or it may not. But I agree with the idea of having a diverse task force review the 360 assessment after it's been presented.
Ashley, do you have an idea of what you would want that to look like? How you want to go about that?
Well, I think it's important that, no, I don't exactly, but I think it's important that we represent some of the groups that the residents have proposed. They would be some of the same ones that I would propose. Underrepresented minorities, LGBTQ plus individuals, just diverse. Youth, I think youth in that group would also be important. I pretty much would agree, with what they have proposed as far as their bigger task force. I think that would also work for a 360 task force if we were to create one of those, if that's something that everybody would agree with.
Oh, thank you. I was wondering about that clarification because their list is not about the same type of community.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Any idea how to find the members?
How to find the members?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Volunteers?
I'm just wondering. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else want to weigh in on Julie's question? Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you very much. I would still like the concept of it. I would still like to understand what the problem is they're trying to look at and solve. So that's where I'm at right now. What's the point? What's the purpose?
Councilmember Brown. Oh, let me unmute you. Sorry. There you go.
I am really good with putting
a balanced task force together to look at the 360 afterwards, I'm totally fine with that. I think that there has to be police input, religious input, LBGT input, everything, you know. And I think that after it's presented to us, I think that's fine. They can be on the call when it's presented to us also, you know, our neighbors, our residents. But I'm okay with that. I am not okay with creating a group, an advisory board, if we must say. I am not in favor of doing that today. I need more community input. I need more to weigh it from. There's two sides to it, and I think that we have to go for the community input before we make any decisions on an advisory board. What does that mean? And I really do feel that we made, like Julie said, we did make some progress today. I think that we made some good progress today. It looks like we've got some movement going. But there's a whole other side of our community that I'm just not willing to not get with before we talk about creating a board and what does that look like and who does that go to and give it a name, you know. I just not tonight. That's not in my that's not on my goal list. My goal is to answer the question, find out what the question is. And we cannot have what the question is unless we have more community input. And we have a responsibility towards our residents, regardless of what ward they live in. It doesn't matter. I think that we all know that we ran on when we ran for office, we wanted to represent the residents of Northglenn. We came in our wards, but it's the residents we worry about. But that's where I am right now. So I support Julie in the fact that I think we should have some kind of a task force, just to go back over it. And I did answer this question I felt earlier too. I am all for extended study sessions. If we put, you know, we just need to make sure that we're mindful and we stick with our other meeting schedule. I am all for that. Anything that we need to push this forward in a clear and concise way to all of our residents, I am for.
Thank you. Councilmember Downing.
Thank you. Just a couple comments, and I guess maybe I need a clarification. Possibly. Anyway, for me, I think right now it's unfair to make a decision if we want to move forward with a task force or an oversight group or advisory group, because it's unfair to, I think, to the citizens that don't know that we're discussing this right now. So I think we need to have more community outreach. And I would kind of put it to staff to actually put it out there, you know, on social media and however else that they might want to do that. I would suggest that. I think that would be a good idea. As far as the task force, and Becky, maybe you can help me with that, is after we receive the information on the 22nd, how are you developing this task force? Or I'm struggling with that piece of it. I don't understand what you are suggesting. I mean, who's going to be the task force listening?
I think I'm wondering this. I feel like, so we're talking about a group to discuss whether or not we need a group.
Right.
Is that right?
I'm confused.
So I'm going to go back to Councilmember Mullica just because she posed the question. Can you describe how that would work?
Yeah, and I think what I'm asking right now isn't necessarily if this group of individuals is going to actually decide whether or not we want an oversight board eventually. I think what I'm initially proposing is this group of individuals going to come together to help us review the 360 assessment and provide feedback on our future community outreach endeavors that we are yet to establish. So I'm not really proposing that this group would propose an oversight board. I think it definitely could be something that they want to do later, but really what I'm trying to focus on is our next step is going to be this 360 assessment coming forward. I want to make sure that we're looking at it from many different perspectives, and we're taking that into account.
So I'm going to go back really quickly. I'm going to just share the screen again. Is this where we are in this conversation? That we are looking at this slide again. So it's either a community task force. So this is a group that we would have to answer these questions. Who should be a part of the group? What are they tasked with producing? What are the timelines? Or is it the work that City Council will do to develop the timeline of next steps, generate questions for the residents, and then think about what next steps are? I mean, I think both of these, if I'm correct, would be looking at the PD assessment, listening to the recommendations that the consulting group is going to bring forward, listening to residents, and helping determine next steps. So I guess is the question, I'm just asking, is this work City Council is going to do in like additional work sessions or is this something that we want to hand off to a group? And then if that's the case, then we need to figure out how to develop that. Am I asking the right question, Julie?
I think so. But actually my idea of it originally, and other people could chime in, is it's not option A or option B. It's actually, how do you do both? How do we have a community task force, diverse voices that are coming together to have this conversation and like working in parallel with City Council? So that's what I imagine would be the best thing for Northglenn. But I mean, that's just my opinion. So whatever others think, option A, B, or all of the above, I guess is the question.
Okay, so I guess I would push back a little bit on timeline only because I know how challenging it is to grab and generate interest from such a diverse group of community members. So did you have a timeline in mind for getting this done?
Well, not entirely. I mean, so we know that we're going to have the presentation for the 360 assessment on July 22nd. Is there a way, if we choose to go with grabbing some residents to come and do this process, is there a way that we could do that? I mean, we have a month before that happens. I mean, do we want to do it via application? Do we want to do interviews? I think that depends on how we want to choose these people. But my hope would be that if they could come together, at least by August, that could help us kind of evaluate not only the 360 assessment. We're going to have our conversation. There's probably going to be a lot of other work sessions in between then, but then also get their feedback as well. So, I mean, you just kind of got to do the best you can with our timeline as it goes forward.
Okay. Councilmember Brown, and then Mayor Pro Tem, and then I think that's all I have right now. Oh, then Councilmember Downing. Oh, I got to unmute Becky again. Sorry. It's only because the phone gives us a little background noise. Sorry. Let's see here. Oops. How's that? Hello.
Okay. So do you remember 2 weeks ago, I don't think we discussed it last week, but 2 weeks ago, we talked about putting a form together. And I kind of see it like that, Julie. We were going to put we talked about putting a form together with our religious leaders, our police department, and having an open conversation about this. And that's kind of where you're going, incorporating the 360 review. But that's what I had suggested a few weeks ago, is that we actually have a communication. We bring the form together at the theater or something. I know we've got the COVID and we could probably put everybody 6 feet apart. That's what my intent was. I really think that having a form, Randall's chin again. Having a form, remember we talked about being educated and being mindful, and I would like to hear from our religious leaders. I would like to hear from the police department. I would like to hear from our residents. I mean, it's a three-tier problem. You know, some people have a different perspective of what, and we've talked about this before, what's actually going on right now. But I would like to see a form, and it kind of evolves into what Julie's talking about, where we have an open dialogue between our police department and our residents, a representative of our police department and our residents. And it doesn't have to just be Chief May, you know, one of his, Commander Osgood, or I just remember her first name is Heidi, isn't it? Somebody like that. Let them have 3 people, and then would have 3 clergy and 3, you know, at that point, I don't even know if it's a resident conversation or if it goes from that conversation into the committee that will look at the 360 review after us and make recommendations. But that's where I was going. We haven't done anything to unite our community, you know, and we haven't done anything to provide our community with additional information. We have vocal groups on both sides, right? And it's not a side thing, but we haven't done anything from a council perspective to help with educating of the matter. And I really strongly encourage us to do that. But that's what I was talking about, and I don't know the timeline on that.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem and then Councilmember Witkovich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can really appreciate that our members of our council have lots of ideas in terms of the ways in which we could do this and what makes the most sense. I think, I guess I want to caution us all, I guess, with the feeling that we don't have to solve this tonight. Like, I think we're getting really bogged down in details that don't have to be decided tonight. I think we can figure out who's going to be on this board, what the right makeup is, how we're going to talk to them, what questions we're going to ask, what we're going to task them with once we've decided that we're even going to go down this path. And I think some of our conversations are starting to get a little circular. And I guess I just want to offer that, you know, I think what both council members Witkovich as well as Duran-Mullica have proposed around a group specifically to look at the 360 review makes a lot of sense. I think that we want more resident voices. We want more eyes on this document and, you know, helping us figure out what the next steps are. So that makes sense to me. I don't think that it makes sense to wait until after the assessment is out to start building what that committee could look like and start engaging with residents now who are sharing their feedback and telling us that they're interested in being engaged. I think that those are conversations that we can start having, you know, as early as our next city council meeting. But I don't think that we have to solve and make a determination in terms of who is on that committee, that group, that task force, whatever we're calling the thing tonight. And so I just want to ask folks, I mean, I want to elevate Councilmember Duran-Mullica and Witkovich's question. Do we want a committee, a task force, a group, whatever we're calling it, to look at the 360 review and to be a partner with us on council in figuring out how we're moving forward? Like, is that something that folks are interested in?
Councilmember Witkovich and then Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to go back real quickly to those option A and B that you were talking about. And I agree with Julie that we can be doing them both at the same time. But I kind of feel like this conversation we're having now about a potential task force to look at the 360 assessment kind of does fall under B, because I think it is a way that we're going to get information from our residents that, you know, maybe we wouldn't have otherwise. So I agree also with Councilmember Wilford that we can start thinking about what that task force would look like now, and potentially accepting applications or volunteers or whatever that's going to look like. But I still think it's important that it be presented to the public and to the council all on the 22nd, and then we figure out when that task force is going to meet. But I think we can figure all that out ahead of time. my idea is to get recommendations from them. And it's just that. It's a recommendation that will come to council that we then discuss. There's no guarantees that anything that task force might come up with, we're going to follow through on, because us 9 individuals are also going to discuss it and take into account all of the information that we've been given. So I just wanted to throw those out there. We don't have to necessarily decide how it will look tonight, but I think we can start scheduling some of our extra meetings, and this can just be one of those topics.
Thank you. Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me see if I can organize my thoughts here. I guess in terms of what our question is here, I think I agree with what I'm hearing a lot of people say, that some kind of community group that could include the police department. I guess because they're already, going to be included anyway. But I think it is important to have some kind of a community group that would look at the 360 assessment, and that we should have some extra sessions to kind of organize our thoughts better on how exactly to make that happen. But I do want to have a question of clarification. I thought I had heard earlier that the 360 assessment was going to be made available to the public on July 10th. So there's this time between the July 10th and when it's formally presented to us on the 22nd. That's 12 days that anybody could be looking at it. So I think if we try to, I think that there is a lot of interest in this. Maybe we all have different ideas of what the problem is, but I think the reason that we're even talking about the fact that we have some kind of a problem to address is because we've had a lot of input from our residents that from a variety of them thinking or telling us that there's a problem, and some of them tell us it's a different kind of a problem. They don't maybe all agree on what the problem is themselves, but it does seem to be something that we need to address. And so I think we should go ahead and move forward on that. And I think there will be enough interest from our residents, of people who want to be on whatever group we are forming, that I think we could probably move faster than maybe we were even thinking, just because there's people listening now. There are people who, went and walked in these solidarity walks or protest marches or whatever they were participating in. They've been writing letters, they've been texting and emailing, and I think that there's enough interest right now that we're going to get participation.
So I think the question might remain is, do we hash the details of this out tonight, or do we set a meeting with this as the topic? Like what is the makeup of this group? What are they going to be tasked with doing? And so that goes back to this same slide and these same questions. So if we do this tonight, then we would answer these 3 questions. Who's going to be a part of the group? What are they tasked with producing? And what are the timeline considerations? If we're going with option A. And if we're going, it sounds like we might be doing a blend. So is that who should be part of this group? Is that they join city council at a work session and it's 9 of us? Or is it that we say we have, representatives from council that join their group and participate in their discussions? I think those are some of those questions, but do you want to answer those questions tonight? Or do you want to set the date and time for answering those questions soon? I've got Councilmember Witkovich, and then Goff, and then Brown.
Thank you. I think that we should set another meeting to discuss those questions.
Okay. Councilmember Goff.
That was quick. Thank you. I think it kind of depends on how soon this next session could happen, because I don't want this to drag out too long. And I think right now people are listening, and those residents who have been writing probably all have ideas about, or some of them anyway, that that they would like to participate in this. And so I would like to ask, do we want to just find out how many people would be interested in being on some kind of a task force just generally tonight to say that? Or are we going to wait till this next meeting and then develop some kind of formal application form? Because that might make a difference. If we have, 50 people who say, I want to be on the task force, then we're definitely going to have to figure out how to, make sure that it's our diversity, the diversity of the group is representative of all the groups that we want to have speaking. But if it's just like maybe 3 people, then we might have to do more of a job of trying to communicate and get the word out to people.
So, Catherine, I'm still not seeing, do you want to hash those details out now, or do you want to schedule another time to do it?
Well, I think I would be inclined to schedule another time to do it, but I want to say to our residents out there that if they're interested, that they could let us know, even before the next meeting.
Okay, got it. Councilmember Downing. Oh, sorry, it was Brown first. I apologize. Becky, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I just agreed to another meeting and additional study sessions. But I agree that I think it's great to have a group of residents. I think that it has to be weighted and so that we get a diverse opinion in it. But I'm good with it, but I want to hash out the details. So if it's good enough, if it's all right to say we're looking into it, I think that we'll come out with something at the end, but I'm not ready to say this is what's happening.
Okay. Councilmember Downing.
That's it.
So I guess I will say ditto, so just to make the story a little bit shorter. But I would agree with another study session. I think we need it. I'm kind of leaning towards a hybrid of the A and B, because I'm leaning towards both. So I think we have to really have another meeting and discuss everything.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think what I'm hearing is that for the most part, absent maybe one member, that nobody disagrees that we shouldn't have some sort of community group to look at the 350 assessment and then make recommendations for how to move forward. And what I'm also hearing is that instead of hashing out those details and the timeline, that we'll push that potentially to next Monday under a discussion, or we would have a special study session.
I think we have to figure that out next. Right now, I only have 4 people that have answered the question of, do you want to have a conversation now, or do you want to schedule another meeting later? So I'm trying to get that done first. And then if we're all in the schedule it later, because I only have 4, if we're all in the schedule it later, then we'll look at the calendar.
Okay, that's great. I just wanted to confirm that I'm hearing that we're all good to move down this pathway of a group to look at the assessment.
So far, I haven't heard from everybody.
Of course. I'm certainly glad to hear that we're moving in that direction. And I think it makes sense to, we often have discussion items for council meetings. I don't know what next week is, if that's I think it's the first Monday, so it's probably a study session. So if we do have time and space to do this next Monday, I think it could be really beneficial. And maybe in the meantime, council members can ask community, who should be included here. Maybe we could be asking community members to help us weigh in on how we're building this thing.
So yeah, I want to talk about the calendar after that, because I don't feel like we need to be squeezing it into our already packed agendas. And so I'd like to propose that we have an additional meeting outside of our Mondays. So I'd like to talk about the calendar after. So Jenny, I'm guessing that you're okay waiting till later.
We don't have to do it tonight. I just don't want to keep it too far down the road. I think it should be happening as quickly as possible.
Yeah. That's what Councilmember Goff said as well. Perfect. Councilmember Downing, did you want to chime in again?
I just want to make it clear that I didn't make a decision one way or the other. I'm willing to look at a task force, but I have not made a decision yet. So I don't want you to take my suggestion of, yeah, I'd like a hybrid versus, but I have not made a decision. I don't know really what I want to do yet. And I think we need more community involvement. So anyway, I just don't want you to take words out of my mouth.
Okay, Councilmember Peterson.
So just a couple of clarifying questions. So, so the report's going to be released on July 10th, and we're going to have the architects of that report to us on the 22nd, right? And so we're doing this, and so now we're talking about, you know, having a citizens group to, you know, to take a look and break this down and be an advisory committee to council to explain what's in it, or is it to make recommendations or policy recommendations based on what's in it? And so I would just like a little more clarification on those things, since it's going to be open to everybody to read. I want, you know, a lot of community voice and input on this, but if I'm not sure, what is it? Is it an advisory committee? Is it to have more eyes on the document? Is it to say, you know, here's what we like or here's what we don't in this? And if we're having, you know, a variety of people in a variety of groups, if we're analyzing data, right, and we're just taking a look at these things, action steps, you know, are very, very important in terms of somebody's background and somebody's perspective and having a diverse voice. But in terms of just breaking down the assessment and having another second set of eyes, that's just looking at data. So I would just like a little more clarification of what is this, what's its purpose, and what's its potential outcome?
I think that's a good question. I'm going to ask Julie to answer it in a second. But the reason I'm still stuck on that is because the timeline that we have. So all of the residents will receive the report or have access to it. We're not mailing it to them, but they'll have access to it on July 10th. The public, the study session presentation of it, I believe, will still be a public meeting. So they will have access to the presentation by the group. And then we have a telephone town hall scheduled like shortly after that. So that's a communication loop with the residents that I feel is important. And so I just don't want to be redundant by spending a lot of time putting a group together to give us recommendations when we can get information from our residents down a different path, like a similar parallel path. So I'm just wondering about the redundancy of it. So it's kind of a similar question. Julie, can you respond to that?
Yeah, sure. And I think you guys, you know, those are great questions. One of the things that I feel like is actually missing from our current plan of, we have the meeting on July 22nd, we have a telephone town hall afterwards. I still don't feel like, even with the telephone town hall, we're not getting a diverse perspective of folks who are coming to the table and giving us direct feedback to this. So I think, to answer Randall's question, it would be to review the assessment, and if they see any additional gaps or any other proposals that perhaps we didn't see, then they could bring those to council for a proposal, or at least, you know, feedback or whatever it is we want them to do as like an outcome measure, right? But I feel like that's why I would like to have this additional group, because even with the telephone town hall, yes, there's so many people who call into them, but not everybody's, like, we don't have enough time to have everyone be heard, and we can't guarantee that we're going to be hearing from the diversity of voices that we want to, which we've already discussed on this call. So I think that that's why adding that additional layer actually builds, actually creates the conversation and the community output that we're looking at. It really actually makes it more robust. I feel like, this conversation is from this council is kind of going.
So a little devil's advocate on that, Julie, I think is, if we are having a hard time having a diverse response or diverse participation in a telephone town hall, how are we going to engage a diverse group to do the work, to get in and participate? Like, I feel like if we can do one, we can do the other. I mean, I'm stuck there.
Yeah, well, and so actually the telephone town hall actually is kind of its own kind of limiting factor, right? You only have so much time to actually get feedback. And to be honest with you, I don't know how you and Heather do it, but how do you choose what caller you choose to call on? How many, some people may not be able to call into that telephone town hall at that time. So I mean, I think it's like, I think the telephone town hall is great. We get a lot of outreach, but how can we really make sure that we're covering all of our bases here? And so I just think it's a great platform, but it's also a limiting platform. And that's why an additional would be helpful.
I agree with you, but I keep going back to, if we can't get them, if they can't be at a phone call at a certain time, what if they can't attend a meeting at a certain time? Or like, to me, the same thing. Like, you're trying to engage voices. Mm-hmm. If we can't do it on a telephone town hall, what makes me think that we can do it in a larger group?
Well, I think that has to be kind of part of the understanding. If you are going to put your name into the hat to be considered for this group, and you identify as one of the diverse groups that we are trying to reach, you have to commit to the work, right? So you have to commit to, whatever meeting schedule they have. I'm sure that they could figure out a way that they could come up with their own meeting schedule. So it's like, I feel like those are the devil in the details. But I really feel like if you're going to put your name in the hat, you have to be, really dedicated to the work. So I hope that, those folks who do have that dedication.
Okay. Member Escobar.
Thank you. So my understanding, just for clarification, is July 10th, the report will be on the website.
Somewhere, yeah.
Is that correct, Heather?
Yes, that is correct. The report will be posted to the PD assessment webpage that's been set up, and that I believe was included in the connection that dropped late last week. I received mine on Saturday, so that the connection should be in homes with that information on the next steps. I believe it was a cover story.
Okay, so then the next question is, how do we, other than the connection, how do we communicate that anybody that wants to read this report can read it online? How are we going to get that message out?
We have plans to push it out via social media. Taking a step back here, I've heard a few different things based on the last couple of council meetings. So at the last council meeting, I had received direction two council meetings ago, to follow up with GARE and get guidance on finding a facilitator that can help council develop a strategy to do listening sessions around the PD assessment. So what's being discussed tonight is a different piece from that piece, and I believe that piece is still out there. So that's something that council is going to need to give me direction on. Do you want me to continue down the path of working with GARE? Rupa and I had a conversation with Roberto Montoya and their executive director, and they're in the process of identifying resources for us, not only for implicit bias training, but also how can we take a look at the PD assessment through a racial equity lens. This is work that has not been done in the city of Northglenn, that other organizations are doing. That it's not right or wrong. It's just new work that we have an opportunity to do. And so I'm waiting to hear back. Rupa and I are from Roberto to see what they come up with in terms of resources for us. Rupa is also evaluating options that have been provided to us in terms of a trainer for implicit bias training. So, we were planning on moving forward based on the diversity framework that was put forward to City Council, and I received direction on last week, and that included listening sessions. I've heard a lot of different things tonight. So might I suggest to Council a couple of things? I've heard a desire for some type of working group, task force, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to suggest maybe you frame it as a working group around the 360 PD assessment. That part of what you tasked that group to do, you could stand it up by the latter part of July. In doing so, we would be able to honor the commitment that we have with Barry Dunn, which is to get the assessment presented to council on July 22nd. The assessment will be put online on July 10th with a virtual input board put up as well. So as residents are diving into the assessment, they can post questions, they can make comments. Mitch is scheduled to present the assessment on July 22nd to council. That's going to be a good solid 2+ hours of information that council's going to get on the assessment. The assessment is, I believe, well over 200 pages. And then on July 29th, we have the telephone town hall meeting scheduled. But again, parallel to this whole discussion was that previous council direction was for me to identify listening opportunities and to engage with our community of color. And so we haven't figured that piece out yet. And that's where Rupa and I are really leaning on Roberto to help us figure out how to do that differently. Because the feedback that I got from council was that our engagement strategy with the PD assessment didn't consist of that specific outreach component. So I think we used a strategy that we've used in the past, if not a little bit more, based on the advisement of Barry Dunn, but I heard there was a desire to do more. So just to recap, that's what I'm hearing based on the discussion tonight. And we'll need clarification. Do you want me to continue down that path based on the diversity framework that Rupa and I outlined with you last week? Or are you choosing to move forward with this working group and you want me to hold off on this other piece? Or do you want to combine them? And that's more of that hybrid approach. And we keep moving forward.
You know, for me, Heather, unfortunately, I keep picturing this really amazing meeting with council and community members all in one room. This online stuff is so hard because I think it would be really great to have council with a working group of residents join us for a work session. And of course, we can still make it happen virtually. It's just not as much fun. So I think that's a really good question because we are putting you in a place of needing that clarification. I have Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm not sure why we went away from the listening tour, that we seem to be all, whatever the tour encompasses, like the details, which we don't need to talk about, but that concept of, I'm not sure it's this or that in terms of a working group or a listening tour, but just matter of factly, if we had ongoing meetings, opening sessions, listening tours with as many people as possible, wouldn't that, one, be more representative, and two, fulfill the goal more than a small committee of having more member or resident input and communication? And so, the more we think about this, it's like, okay, we have a group that might advise us and look at it from various perspectives. But I think we might have been too quick to forget or abandon that listening tour. It seems to be utilitarian to reach the most amount of people in the best amount of ways.
Councilmember Mullica.
And kind of following up where Randall's question left off, why can't we do both? Why can't we do all of the above? Like, why can't we just make this the most robust community outreach conversation we've ever seen in Northglenn? This is kind of a really unprecedented time for us. And to be honest with you, I don't know if we've ever had this much community input on anything, really. So I actually think let's do all of it. I think it could be really helpful. we haven't talked about the listening sessions yet. I think that should be definitely a next step of what do those look like. And I think somewhere in here, it's what questions should we ask? What does that even look like? The listening tours in themselves is like a whole nother working meeting, if you will, of like, what does that look like? What kind of outreach is in there? And we should even get community feedback on the listening tours as well, and how to make them really successful, because that's what we want. We want successful groups that come together, that we get diverse feedback. So I would just say, let's do it all. And then that way we could really get, some rich conversation going in our community.
So I have Councilmember Witkovich, Brown, and then Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Mullica. To answer Heather's question, I think we combine it. I think the facilitator is going to be important for those listening tours, and I think we definitely need the training information from GARE. But I really kind of like the idea that we've come up with for the working group to take a look at that 360 assessment. It's just, let's just do it all. I agree with Julie.
Councilmember Brown.
I think that somebody, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it, that we haven't had this much community input, but we did. Kind of going to go back through memory lane, and I think that Joyce might be the only one who remembers it. But when we first brought marijuana to the residents, and whether that was going to be, look at Joyce, whether that was going to be on the ballot or not, or what we were going to do with that, we did roundtable steering committee, where we actually brought people in and we talked to them, And Joyce, you want to talk to her a little bit more?
Okay. You're absolutely correct. We did contact all of the marijuana businesses, brought them in to a study session, and had a lot of input, as well as we had a lot of residents that we actually reached out to, and they definitely gave us input also. But yeah, we had a lot of community input with that. And then the other one, prior to that, was the water. When we put in our water system, we had so much community input, you cannot believe. We filled the theater. That's how much input. So I think the community will become involved if we ask them to. I definitely do.
Joyce, on the marijuana one, did anything help us facilitate those?
Anything, or who? I can't hear.
Yeah.
No.
Anything library?
No.
They I guess they held. I kind of vaguely remember them being held at M&O.
We had M&O as well as just at City Hall. We had some over there.
Think, not that I'm saying that we should change anything we've been talking about. Right. I'm very much a hybrid method. I'm just saying that we have been very successful in the past at bringing the community together for large subjects. Sensitive subjects.
Right.
Nothing between the water and the marijuana. Now that I remember it, boy, they really came out. Our residents really came out for that. And when we start talking about steps and how to bring the groups together, we should not recreate the wheel. We should try to look back at what we did with those that we had so much success on. And Joyce could lead us through all that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but we did. We had a lot, and I know staff has got a lot of input also. And while I've got the floor real quick, I want to thank Heather for kind of bringing us back to what we discussed a meeting or so ago, because I think it's very important to acknowledge that, because all of council decided to go down that path, and now we're deviating a little bit. So I would really like to make sure we stay on target and focus on what we want to do. And so there we go.
Mayor Pro Tem Wolford.
I don't even remember what I was going to ask at this point. You can have
Okay. So I don't have input from everyone on the, let's see, who am I missing? Councilmember Esquivel, did you weigh in on, I mean, I'm guessing we don't want to hash the details of this out tonight. I feel like
you're exactly correct. And before we close this meeting, I have a point of personal privilege and a little humor. So when you get ready to close out, let me know.
Okay, I certainly will. Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, clarify or whatever that I did like the idea of trying to do combining or doing everything, but I do have sort of a clarification question for Heather, and maybe it's because it's late and I'm tired or whatever, but I don't remember exactly what the Race and Equity Task Force was supposed to be or was going to be, and is there a possibility that whatever this group is that we're putting together to look at the 360 assessment could be folded into that or become that? Or could you just say a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Councilmember Goff. So the Race and Equity Task Force originated from the 2019 City Council strategic planning process. So that was an idea that was identified, and it may have even come up, but even earlier than 2019. That was in a previous strategic plan that was carried forward. I don't recall off the top of my head because it is getting late. At any rate, council identified it as an important element of the overall race and equity framework. And so details about what that specifically looked like, that conversation hasn't been had because that work was supposed to begin within the first part of this year, and COVID-19 happened. And is still with us and will be with us for quite some time. So many of the strategic planning initiatives that we were scheduled, myself and staff, to work on within the first couple quarters of the year were put on hold. In addition, the added element of that was the identified budget reductions that I was asked to make. And so the microaggression training that we had planned to put out to in the form of a request for proposal, similar to what the city of Boulder has done this year, was supposed to happen. But that funding was also put on the reduction list in order to meet that 15% reduction that council asked me to identify. So based on the direction that I've received thus far, we're reevaluating that. And I need to come back to council with, here's a plan of how to move forward that microaggression training. And that training was also for board and commission members, as well as city staff and city council. So that was really intended to be a very robust training program that was going to take place this upcoming fall.
Thank you. I just didn't remember that, and it sounds like it could possibly merge or support or in some way the this working group we're trying to develop.
Absolutely.
So I'm trying to figure out how to land this plane because I feel like we've had a lot of conversation, but I don't know where we've landed. I'm getting more and more confused, especially because I feel like we're doing the work and now we're just going to have an additional parallel process, but we're not going to plan it tonight. And so, should we just look at the calendar and figure out when we can finish this conversation or continue this conversation? I think it's risky when we try to add it to something else, but Heather, do you have any recommendations on what we have coming up?
Certainly, Mayor. I wouldn't recommend trying to add it to an existing meeting. Next week's meeting, I will be out of town, so I won't be on that meeting. You'll be discussing the draft resolution for the racial equity work. based on the plan that was presented last week. And then COVID-19 proposed businesses back recovery grant. So phase 2 of our Elevate Small Business Grant Program. That's that discussion. And then July 13th is full. We already have a couple, just 3 discussion items there. July 20th is full as well. So I would recommend scheduling an additional session based on what's been discussed tonight.
Councilmember Mullica.
So I'm in favor of scheduling an additional session because it's 9:25, and I don't think any of us are prepared to really continue diving into this conversation. I think where I felt we landed is our next session could include essentially just following this conversation up. What would the task force look, or the working group, we're using working group, I like that idea. What would the working group look like? How would we get there? What would they, they would review the 360 assessment. The only recommendation, or at least ask that I have of this group, is if we could have that meeting sooner or later. I just don't want it to be really drawn out, so that we have a working group that comes together in October, for example. So, I mean, something like, yeah, it's a little far. So, I know that it all depends on people's schedules, but, as soon as we could have the extra meeting, that would be fantastic.
So Heather, a quick question. Have you had an opportunity to schedule the additional trainings that we've talked about? Did you already say that?
No, I haven't, because Rupa and I are waiting for Roberto to get back to us with resources. So GARE had asked us for a couple weeks to put thoughts together to really assist us with the implicit bias training resources and then next steps for the listening tours. So, something to think about is I just exchanged an email with Rupa today to follow up with GARE to see where they're at. It may be that we have that information by the end of the week, maybe next week. And then we can provide that information to council to help inform that next conversation that you'd like to have in figuring out the working group. The other piece with the listening groups, the listening tour meetings, is the facilitator can pose the question of what problem are we trying to solve, and see what kind of, among other questions that a facilitator would ask. And the facilitator wouldn't be staff, it wouldn't be any of you. In my mind, it would be a third party facilitator, someone of color, based on the prior request that I received from council, who would engage with the community through these sessions.
Yeah, that's an additional thing. I mean, I feel like we need to chart it out with all these strategies that we have and the do it all, which I totally appreciate. I'm just like, do it all. There's a lot of things, and some of that's going to fall on the city. Some of that's going to fall on us trying to get it all organized. So I mean, we can do it all for sure. I just don't know how and when. Which is why I go back to my previous place, which is, can't we work this process with the community and then see what we need? I feel like we're just doing double work, and I'm confused about that. So, I mean, but I'm happy to do it. So if we want to look at the week of the 13th, do we just want to propose on the 15th, we'll have a study session at 6 and meet for a couple hours to knock this out? Antonio's good. We got some thumbs up. How about unmute if that doesn't work for you?
I'm just, so that's a study session meeting. We don't have anything else planned for that already?
On the 15th, July 15th is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at June 15th. Yes, that's fine for me.
Okay. Can anybody not attend? Okay, so at minimum, July 15th, study session at 6 o'clock with us. And I believe the purpose is to talk about, I mean, I didn't get 100% consensus on the community group in my notes, but if we're putting together a work group of community members, then the 15th is when we're discussing it. Okay, that's it. Councilmember Brown. Oh, let me unmute you. Sorry.
At 6 o'clock?
Okay, 6 o'clock, yes.
Okay, at 6 o'clock? Okay, because I already have a study session on that day. Did it go out already?
Nope, July 15th.
That's what I'm looking at. Must be something funky with my calendar.
Oh.
That's what happened here in a house from 1947. Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I don't.
No, it's my calendar. But now I do have one on the 15th. Thank you.
There you go. Ms. Goff, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and just if you guys are going to want Corey there, I just took a peek at his schedule. He may not be able to be there, but I can if you guys need someone. So just as an aside, I'll make sure I mention it to him, and we'll let you guys know.
He can, Ruthie.
Yes.
He can telecommute from Telluride.
Man, he doesn't take very many vacations, so we sort of were like, just go.
Let him go. That's fair. Okay, so we have that. Antonio, you are up. Your point of privilege.
Thank you, council members. Meredith, you'd pull up page 14 for me.
Oh, certainly.
Can you do that?
Yep, we're getting there. Hold on.
This will be an educational piece and a point of personal privilege, and it'll also be a little bit of humor.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't hit share. I could see it. All right, now we're up.
Well, I was just looking down these bullet points, and I realized how privileged I am. If you look at the bullet point under underrepresented minority. So originally I was Spanish. And then from Spanish, I went to being Mexican. Then from Mexican, I went to being Mexican American. Then I was Chicano. And then I was Latino. And then I was Hispanic. And now I just see on there that it says Latinx. And I have no idea what that means. It must be a new social media communication. Latinx. So now, see how privileged I am? Some of you only have one, maybe two. Gosh, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I went back and forth with Mexican a couple of times. Thank you very much, Mayor.
All right. Okay. Well, we have a date on the calendar. I think we're good. Any other business items tonight? Okay. Thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your evening. This meeting is adjourned.
Good night. Good night, guys.
Bye.